my perception as a 12 years old boy was that there is a monk and he is peaceful, that he is protecting others and he is peaceful even though he is attacked by bad people. And I was so inspired by that. And when I was 12, I remember that the thought came to me, I also want to be a monk like that. And then later, when I was 15, I started to read books about magic, and from them, about psychic powers especially, and from them I learned about Buddhism. So I learned that Buddhist monks attain the highest psychic powers. And for me, this idea that I would have these powers was a kind of like security, like this will make me safe in my life, if I have these psychic powers. Only later, as I studied Buddhism, I found out that there are even more, even like higher, nobler purposes of meditation, such as getting free from all mental defilements, getting free from rebirth. Considering how impossible that is, the Buddha then suggests, and even rarer it is to be born as a human to get this opportunity to attain enlightenment. And I thought, so I'd better do something. I felt that in Myanmar I will find such monk, and I did find so many exquisite persons in Myanmar, not just monks but also nuns and lay people. And so I came to Myanmar, I met those people. At the current time, I'm basically maintaining what I have experienced in the past, because now I'm dedicating more to others. I'm teaching meditation, I'm teaching the Buddha's teachings, sharing what I know in several languages, and trying to make the Buddha's teachings more accessible to all others so that they are inspired on their path toward meditation, toward enlightenment.
I first started thinking about this podcast project about a year ago, but until only recently, I never imagined that I would be able to actually get it off the ground. The resources were simply not there. However, that all changed when a surprise donation arrived several months back, enough to at least fund a short run of episodes. There were suddenly a lot of important questions to consider: what recording equipment to use, what kind of radio persona best suited me, and what overall format and structure we wanted, and of course, what guests to invite. For the latter question, several names came up right away as obvious must-have choices, one of them being U Sarana. But while many more names came to mind in the days and weeks that followed, he was always near the top of that list. And why wouldn't he be? A monk from the Czech Republic who set his sights on full ordination in Myanmar from the time he met a Burmese forest monk in Sri Lanka after 3 years of study at a top Buddhist university there, and he so admired this monastic's comportment that U Sarana's only desired destination at the completion of his studies was the Golden Land. U Sarana and I go way back. I was one of the first people to meet him after he arrived here about 8 years ago. Although I'd had nearly twice as much Burmese language study as him, even then our language ability was about equal. But now it's not even a question, as he gives Dhamma discourses lasting hours to Burmese audiences and oversees his own meditation retreats. U Sarana and I worked closely together for several years on the Meditator's Guidebook project, and I can safely say that the information provided in those pages would have taken on a much different shape, and certainly much less depth without his involvement. I have rarely met anyone so ravenous for information and so meticulous in categorizing even the smallest details in a comprehensive manner. So the question was not if we should approach U Sarana, nor even how soon to bring him on, because the obvious answers were yes and immediately. Rather, the question was how to best use our time together, fully aware that we would be within the breadth and depth of his knowledge in almost any Dhamma-related topic, and in whatever direction that conversation would take us. For this reason, I decided I would ask him to come more than once, and felt the best use of time in this initial interview was to learn about what had brought him to the Golden Land. In our subsequent interviews, we hope to explore pertinent topics related to Vipassana practice, monasticism, and other contemporary issues relating to Burmese Buddhism. Once grounded in this base of understanding, how and why U Sarana ended up here, his later answers should be all the more relevant and impactful. Although U Sarana has by now become something of a celebrity in Burmese culture, he remains resolute to return to the forest for secluded meditation after the completion of the many projects he's currently working on. His mastery of the Burmese language, combined with his expert use of new technologies and social media and his comprehensive study of the Abhidhamma, an especially revered text in Myanmar, has elevated him to a unique place not only in contemporary times, but really in all of Burmese Buddhist history. Because when else has a foreigner come from so far away to integrate himself so thoroughly in not only the local culture and society, but also local religion and monasticism? And since the country has opened to the outside world after many decades of restrictions and challenges, a new chapter in the development of Burmese Buddhism is unfolding, and it's a chapter in which U Sarana will surely be included. It was great to take this chance to sit down and hear what he's been up to until now. Get ready because a lot of good stuff is coming your way. Okay, yeah, great. So I think we met, what year was it, 2012?
Certainly not 2012, possibly 2013 or 14. 2012, I just came to Myanmar.
Okay, I think I met you pretty soon after you came. I'm not exactly sure how long it was, but so it could have been 2012, 2013. 13 sounds about right, actually. Yeah, at Shui U Min. So when you first came to Myanmar, you were at Shui U Min initially, I think.
Yes, I came to Myanmar and right away to Shui Montoya.
Right. Yeah. And then you were at Shui U Min for a while. I met you very soon after you came after. And then not long after that, started on this guidebook project for meditators. And you were instrumental in helping out for the research on that, both in terms of books and people and translations and research trips. So we worked together extensively on that.
Yeah. Thank you very much for giving me that great opportunity.
Yeah. Well, your help raised it up a level for sure. Meditators who benefited from that definitely can feel grateful for you. And I'm trying to think, when was the last time we saw each other? Do you remember?
I don't.
A few years ago. Anyway, it's good to meet now. Mm-hmm. It was a good excuse to be back in touch. Definitely changes happened in both our lives since then. One of the things I'm curious about to start with is just your background. You're from Czech Republic. Are you from a small town, big city?
I'm from Czech Republic, and I'm from a relatively big city, not from a very big city, but it's certainly not a small city, not a small town, not a village for sure. It's Pilsen. It's in the west of Czech Republic.
Famous for beer, right?
And for Škoda cars.
Okay, two things. Right. And can you tell us a little bit about your family and upbringing?
Yes, I was born to a family. I have a younger brother and an older brother, but they have a different father. We have the same mother, different father. Our mom passed away when I was 5, and since then, even before that, we were separated in one way or another. So before that, I was with my younger brother. My elder brother was with his father somewhere else. And after our mom passed away, I stayed alone. And my younger brother and older brother both stayed with their father. They have the same father, and I have a different father. So I stayed with him. And then when I was around 12 years, actually, I met my brothers again. After like 7 years of not meeting them at all.
Right.
And it actually, there are just so many funny stories. We met in an underground passage, underground, there are like stores, whatever. And we met there, and I didn't recognize them. Elder brother stopped me and he said, "Hey, you are our brother, aren't you?" And I say, I don't know you. What should I say?
So he recognized you by your facial features?
They recognized me. I didn't recognize them at all. I thought there are some strangers. So that way we met again. And then I studied at a Catholic high school since my age of 11, 12.
So you came from a Catholic background?
Not really Catholic, not devoted for sure. My dad believes that there is a God creator, but that's pretty much all of his Christianity. My mother's beliefs are not known to me. And when I studied Catholic high school, I learned a lot about Christianity. I tried out to be Christian. I visited the how would you call it, the temple room. There I dedicated myself to the devotion, but I didn't get any feedback. I didn't get any feedback from up. And so then I put it aside because there was nothing giving me, energy, nothing encouraging me. So then I put it aside. And then later, when I was 15, I started to read books about magic, and from them about psychic powers especially, and from them I learned about Buddhism. So I learned that Buddhist monks attain the highest psychic powers, and thanks to that I started to learn about Buddhism, and I found this teaching on karma, one's deeds and consequences of deeds, or anatta, not self, very resonating with me. I felt like, wow, this is it. This is the truth. It must be like this. And then I knew that this is what I want to follow. So then with these great answers to my huge questions, which I had already since my age of 5, I was so enthusiastic to learn more, but I didn't have any Buddhist friend at all, zero. The most Buddhist friend that I had was somebody who would lit a candle in front of a Buddha. That was all what was his Buddhism. So then when I was 18, by email, I emailed a Zen monastery in Czech Republic, and they forwarded that email to their friend who was a Theravada monk who was originally from Czech Republic. And he forwarded my email that I want to become a monk to his students who previously were monks, but now they teach meditation in Czech Republic. So then I visited them and I learned meditation from them, and that's how I got to meditation too.
So it sounds like your early interest wasn't just even initially in Buddhist meditation or study, but right away wanting to be a monk. Sounds like that was very early on.
That's true.
That's unusual. So for other practitioners, foreign practitioners that are on the path, often there's an early interest in meditation or Buddhism, and then eventually that grows into monasticism. But for you, it sounds like from the very beginning, initially the interest in monasticism was always there.
I wanted to get these psychic powers of flying in the air, disappearing and appearing and knowing minds of others and knowing everything that I want to know. That was just such a fantastic idea that I will be able to fly and disappear, and do whatever I want. I can multiply myself, and know anything I want. This was so good, from the standpoint of somebody who has nothing, who has no wisdom, who has no religion, who doesn't know what is the purpose of life. For somebody who has just a dad who goes to work and me, going to school, and what's next, no real dedicated future or purpose. And for me, this idea that I would have these powers was a kind of security, this will make me safe in my life, if I have these psychic powers. So this was one of the main purposes why I wanted to be a monk, because the book said that the monks have these psychic powers. So then, of course, I need to become a monk to get them. Only later, as I studied Buddhism, I found out that there are even more, higher, nobler purposes of meditation, such as getting free from all mental defilements, getting free from rebirth. I read quite a number of books, and comparing the different sources of learning magic, I found out that the Buddhist monks attain the most powerful psychic powers. That was, of course, my own conclusion, but that's how it happened.
Right. And earlier you said that in reading about anicca, anatta, dukkha, that resonated with you right away. What about that message resonated with you?
For me, not necessarily anicca dukkha resonated with me. I couldn't understand it. Like when I read a book about Buddhism where the Buddha asked the monks, "So, monks, do you think that this body is permanent or impermanent?" And then I thought, wow, I don't know. What's the answer? And there's the answer. They're impermanent, sir. And I thought, aha, I didn't know that. And I thought like, how did they know it?
Right. Yeah.
You know?
So this was a very new concept.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then like the Buddha says, well, then if this body is impermanent, it is pleasant or unpleasant? And I thought, wow, I didn't know this. What's the answer? And they say, it is unpleasant. Is it really unpleasant? I didn't know that. So I didn't know anything about anicca dukkha, and the idea that it could inspire me or not is very beyond the level of my thinking at that time, because if I couldn't even answer those questions, I couldn't even understand it. Like why is this body impermanent? Why wouldn't it be permanent? Why is it like I can understand that it's like impermanent, that one needs to die. That's obvious, but like why would they answer immediately that it's like impermanent? Couldn't there be like some other answer, like partially permanent,
Right.
partially impermanent, or maybe permanent this way, permanent, you know? And there was nothing like that. And then I thought, like, why would this body be suffering? You know, isn't there so much of pleasure? Like when I eat tasty food and when I enjoy sensual pleasures, why would it be just outright suffering? You know, without any thinking. So I couldn't understand it. So because I couldn't understand it, it of course couldn't inspire me or in any way address me. However, the idea of not self was very important, because I was always thinking, like, who am I? Like, what's this me? You know, why am I here? You know, when I was 5, I was thinking, like, maybe somebody sent me from the space, you know, and I have a purpose here to do something, but I don't know what's the purpose. So then the idea of not self was like so clear. Yes, my body is changing, my mind is changing, my character is changing, everything is changing. So not self is the answer, and I liked it so much. And for Kamma, usually it's known as karma, but in the Pāli language, the language which we believe the Buddha spoke, it's known as kamma. And I like the idea that there is a sense behind things, you know, like why are people poor? Why are people clever? Why are people successful? Why are some not successful? Our family was not very rich. Like we had food, like we had places to stay, everything is fine, but we were not very rich, you know, like we had car, but somebody crashed the car, so we didn't have a car, and so on and so on. So we were not like fairy tale rich, but we did have what we needed. And I was thinking, like, there are people at school, you know, who have their car and whose parents have their car and they have their computer and they play games and they do these things and those things, and they can afford this kind of clothes and that kind of things. And I cannot afford all those things. And I felt like, wow, we are not as rich as others, you know, comparing
so it provided
myself.
answers for you.
And I was thinking, like, why? And then later, I was thinking, like, why are some people more happy, some people not so happy? Why do people die earlier and why do people die later? And this idea of karma made just so much of sense to the world. That, of course, it doesn't mean that world needs to have sense, as many people suggest. Like, why should world need to have sense? But so far, everything else makes sense. Like, hey, this hand is attached to the body. It's not attached to the wall. You know, the eye is in the eye socket. You know, it's not on the nose. So other things make sense. So why shouldn't other things make sense? Why shouldn't these things make sense? So I like to live in a life, you know, which makes sense. It gives me a direction. It gives me a hope.
Great. And you would reference that your initial interest in Dhamma and practice was developing these psychic powers. Is that still a driving force and motivator for your time in robes now?
It certainly is a desirable factor, but it's not the only factor. So if I learned that there is a practice which I will practice, and then like tomorrow I will become fully enlightened, but I will have no psychic powers, then I would like it. then I would go for it.
Right.
So, but I don't know about that kind of practice. I need to work hard to get fully enlightened. And it seems that it's the other way. It seems that I first need to get mastered in the concentration in order to have the higher levels of enlightenment easier available. So there are 4 levels of enlightenment: the stream enter, once returner, non-returner, and arahant. Arahant is the highest. Now, stream enter, once returner need to be perfected in their morality, in their ethics. Now, for non-returner, for the 3rd level, it is better to practice jhanas. It is better to practice strong concentration, because non-returner, as is explained in a very important meditation guidebook known as Visuddhimagga. Visuddhimagga, I need to add this, explains how monks attained arahanthood at that time, in the 3rd, 2nd, 1st century after Christ.
Okay, and can you remind the listeners when the Buddha lived?
The Buddha lived 5 centuries before Christ, and and we do not have any better guidebook.
Right.
Like this one is so detailed. It explains this arahant did this.
So this was a guidebook a meditation guidebook about 6 to 7 centuries after the Buddha's life.
Yes, right. Yes, about arahants. About arahants of that time. So how did arahants of the 1st, 2nd, 3rd century after Christ become arahants? And the guidebook gives such fantastic detail that it is certainly worth it, like I would like to be an arahant of that time, And so I liked it so much that I studied it. And of course, there I learned that for the 3rd level of enlightenment, it's really good to have strong concentration, because the 3rd level of enlightenment is characterized by mastery in concentration. The 4th level of enlightenment is characterized by mastery of wisdom. So I believe that it is better to practice concentration if we want to attain the higher attainments.
So is that your current practice now, concentration practices?
At the current time, I'm basically maintaining what I have experienced in the past, because now I'm dedicating more to others. I'm teaching meditation, I'm teaching the Buddha's teachings, sharing what I know in several languages, and trying to make the Buddha's teachings more accessible to all others, so that they are inspired on their path toward meditation, toward enlightenment.
Right, right. So it's not uncommon for many Westerners to develop some kind of passing interest in Buddhism or meditation, but you've actually gone far beyond this. You've structured your whole life around it. So I'm wondering, what was the turning point that made you want to commit to this level of dedication?
The first point, one very important point was the Buddha's simile about the one-eyed tortoise. So the Buddha teaches that there is like as a simile, he suggests, like monks suppose that there would be a one-eyed tortoise at the bottom of the ocean, and there would be a yoke, like the thing that you apply on oxen when you're going to plow. So there would be a yoke thrown over the water, and the yoke would be floating on the surface of the ocean, and there's the wind from the north, south, east, west. And the one-eyed tortoise would come up once every 100 years. So how often will it happen that this one-eyed tortoise will stick its head through the yoke? And considering how impossible that is, the Buddha then suggests, and even rarer it is to be born as a human to get this opportunity to attain enlightenment. And I thought, so I'd better do something.
So that simile was instrumental in your decision to take on the role and the dedication that you have now.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Right. I see. The vocation of being a monastic, it's little understood, little practiced in contemporary Western society. So I'm wondering if you can recall the first time that you even heard about the concept of ordination.
Yes, that was when I was 12. When I was 12, I watched the movie, The 36th Chamber. It's a Shaolin movie. And at that time, I didn't know anything about Buddhism. I just saw there a monk fighting, that was all. And The 36th chamber, at that time when I saw it as a 12-year-old boy, I could maybe understand maybe like 20% of it, because it's very deep. For me, I believe that there is a deeper sense in it, rather than just a boy from a village who's going to protect his family. But what I saw there, my perception as a 12 years old boy, was that there is a monk and he is peaceful, that he is protecting others and he is peaceful, even though he is attacked by bad people. And I was so inspired by that. And when I was 12, I remember that the thought came to me, I also want to be a monk like that. And I just totally gave up. I just like totally threw it away. Like, now is not the time. Finished. And I didn't think about it. Then just recently, like several years ago, when I was like thinking, when did this all started, I realized, hey, yeah, actually when I was 12, I saw this movie.
It was a Hollywood movie or a Chinese movie.
It's a Chinese movie.
Right, yeah. So that was your first impetus on the path, so you can thank the director and writer of that film. Yeah, and so then you saw this movie. When did you, so I understand in seeing the movie, you were inspired by the character and the storyline. When I was a kid, I was inspired by Luke Skywalker, and I wanted to be a Jedi, I think, like a lot of other people. But then you have those kind of childhood, fantasies or inspirations, and then time moves on. So this obviously had an impact on you. But then when did you first really seriously contemplate the possibility that renunciation and ordination was possible?
Immediately as I read the book about white magic. It's actually, I think it's called White Magic, but I don't remember. It's a very deep book. You shouldn't think of a child book. No, absolutely. It's a very deep book. It has like 300 pages, and I couldn't understand from it almost anything at all. So I was just reading it in order to have it read.
Was it fiction or nonfiction?
No, it's a book, I suppose, written by a follower of New Age movement, which is a combination of Buddhism with other traditions. And there was the mention that the Buddhist monks have these psychic powers. And just as I read it, I knew I will be a Buddhist monk. And
how old were you at the time?
15. And then immediately as I finished reading of the book, I decided to be a vegetarian. It's like the first step on becoming a Buddhist monk. And I was vegetarian since then until today.
Did you eat meat today?
I was vegetarian. I have been vegetarian. It's difficult English. I have been vegetarian since that day until today.
Right, okay.
So I never ate any meat or fish.
Right. I didn't know if you had some morning surprise meat dish, but
you didn't know it?
No. So you mean you've been vegetarian that day forward?
Yes, for 17 years now.
Right. And are most Buddhist monks vegetarian?
Not most, but many. Many Theravada Buddhist monks are vegetarians.
In Myanmar also?
In Myanmar also. Not most, but many. So there would be I believe tens of thousands of monks would be vegetarians for sure.
Right. And what do you think is the relationship with being vegetarian and on a spiritual path or wearing robes?
Being a vegetarian is a kind of letting go. It's part of letting go. So letting go of meat or fish is really helpful. I don't say that it's essential, but it certainly is helpful on the path. We need to let go a lot of things.
Why is it helpful?
Because it is possible to let go of it without, dying. And if we can let go, the more we can let go, the better, So, of course, we can let go of everything, and then just live on water and bread. But we gradually learn to let go more and more. And letting go of meat and fish is helpful because there is a kind of lightness, or that is my feeling, that letting go of meat and fish is a little bit lighter. Also because we know those who don't eat meat or fish certainly have that understanding that the less people will eat meat and fish, the less animals and fish will be killed.
Right.
So with that addition to this lightness and to this letting go and to this health which I gained through being vegetarian, it is really helpful. I would like to note here that the greatest, the top master in Myanmar in the education, in the monastic education field, who has memorized 20 books of the Pitaka. The Pitaka has 40, he has memorized 20. And that's itself known like as if he memorized all, because that's the most important part. And he also is a vegetarian. And when people ask him, why are you a vegetarian? He says, for health.
And who is this?
Yoseyado.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So Yoseyado has become a vegetarian, and when people ask him, so why did you become a vegetarian? And he says, no, this is not because of Vinaya or because of the Buddha's teachings, it's because of health. And I heard that many of the health problems that Yoseyado had when he ate meat and fish disappeared short after he became a vegetarian.
Mm-hmm. And what do you find are Burmese attitudes towards vegetarianism?
Diverse.
Okay.
Yeah, people think all kinds of things in Myanmar. The shock from the cultural shock from the West is making such a great diversity in the Asian mind. They have this culture and they have the Western culture, and now how to reply on it. Like the culture in Myanmar is just believe everything what the Sayadaw, what the teacher says, and don't say a word, because if you don't like it, it means you didn't understand it. And now the Western culture says, no, it's the other way. You need to ask, because if you don't ask, if you don't understand it, then it means you need to get more help from the teacher. Mm-hmm. So it's a totally different attitude, and the Burmese people are very confused about that.
Right. Interesting. So getting back to your path on the robes and as a monastic, when you were 15 was when you said you read this book and you knew that you absolutely wanted to be a Buddhist monk. So when did it happen, and how did it happen from there?
Yeah, it happened during one evening as I was sitting on a chair in front of a computer. I had this book, and I didn't read it from computer. I read it from a book. And then I finished the book and I thought, yes, this is what I want. I want to be a monk. I want to get these psychic powers. From now on, I'm a vegetarian. So I think I went to the kitchen and I told my granny. I stayed with my granny and my father. And I said, so now I'm a vegetarian. I'm not going to eat any meat or fish. And then my father agreed. My father was very happy about it. My granny disagreed. She didn't like it at all. And so anyway, gradually I proved that I'm serious. And then from then on, I read more and more books about Buddhism and also books about magic. I still wanted to know more and understand more, especially what's truth. Many people fake. Many people are fake. They say that they do magic, but they don't. Like there are people who are doing this parlor magic, but I'm now talking about those like real fake. Like they fake it in such a way that you really believe it, and that's what they intend that you believe it.
Sure, right.
And unfortunately, we find that even in Asia, even in serious places like monasteries and other places, and that is very distressing. So for me, if I have to dedicate whole my life to something, then of course I don't want to dedicate myself to something fake or to something untrue. So I wanted to study more and more and understand what is behind magic. And then the science, is another pressure. Like science says this, science says that. Now magic says this, magic says that. Science says you cannot make rain. Magic says yes, you can make rain. Science says you cannot levitate. Magic says you can. So how to reconcile this? So this is such an interesting topic for me, and I'm always open to learn more and to investigate more. Until now, I don't know how to levitate or how to disappear. So until now, even though I already have memorized the techniques, I have learned the techniques, how to achieve these things and how do they happen and how exactly this is practiced, still I am open for more answers and for more explanation.
Right. So you mentioned at the age of 15, becoming resolute, you wanted to become a vegetarian and be on a Buddhist path. As you said that, I couldn't help but laugh because I'm a vegetarian as well. And I remember my difficulties in Czech Republic. I'm sure it's easier when you know the language and culture. I didn't really know either. And I ended up with, 15 different types of potato dishes every day. So, but I'm sure that that when you know your way around, you can get a well-balanced vegetarian meal. But I'm also curious, when you said this to your parents, kids get a lot of ideas of what they want to do and what they want to be. And, around that age, it's not uncommon for a kid to go to the parent and say, I've decided I now want to do this, or I now want to be this. And, the parent or grandparent might lovingly say, oh, okay, dear, go ahead. Good luck to you. And we'll see how you feel next week or next month. In this case, this resolution that you had when you were 15 informed your whole life in front of you. And I'm wondering about your parents' reaction, if you know anything about how they took it at the time, how much they believed in a 15-year-old's assertion of this life vision that was so unusual, and how their attitude changed through your process.
I was fortunate for parents who were open, especially from my dad, who encouraged me on this path. He saw this as like an additional parenting, that I will basically learn to be a good person, not just from my dad, but also from the books. And my dad had this great wish, that I will be a good person. And he tried to show me the right path. And I'm very thankful to my dad for
so very supportive
for so many things that he taught me, and how he led me, and how he was always careful. The other people around him and me, of course, were criticizing his style, because he was very, very strict for everything. Just talking, just saying a sentence. Oh, no, you shouldn't say the sentence like this. You should use different word and different sound or whatever. And so my dad was very, very strict. But at that time, although it was a lot of suffering, now, thanks to his help, I believe that I can express myself better, and other people can resonate more with that, what I try to share with them. And so thanks to my dad's intentions, I was able to experience a lot of success and a lot of progress on the path to be a good person. And I studied a lot about ethics and about being a good person, an ethically living person, from books. And my dad always supported me with this. The one important factor here is that my dad, when he was somewhere around my age, also practiced magic, not Buddhist magic at all. Not Buddhist magic at all. My dad practiced more of a kind of mind work. My dad never shared with me exactly what he did, but he told me that he had there was a group of friends, and they would learn how to use the mind to do things beyond physics, like metaphysics. And my dad said that he went all the way to the stage when he could know what will happen next 3 minutes without knowing it, without anybody telling him.
Wow.
And he also told me that he had a very important state where he was able to purify himself from all his deeds in the past. Something like the moment before you die. Some people, before they die, they can see all of their deeds in the past, and they can learn what was wrong, what was right. It's a kind of judgment preparation, if we take it a little bit from the Christian view. And so my dad believes that this was his enlightenment, but he doesn't. When I started to speak to him about Buddhism, he wasn't able to resonate with it. He was able to agree, but he said, "But I never read anything like this in the books." And my dad would you say adamant? That he really loves philosophy.
Right.
So when he saw me studying philosophy, when he saw me studying Buddhism, when he saw me meditating, he was so happy. What he was not happy was my strictness, but maybe that's what I learned from him, actually, that I would like meditate, meditating 30 minutes and nobody will disturb me. So whatever he would do or whatever anybody would do, I would not move until the time was up. So that was one thing he a little bit feared about, that I'm too strict about the rules. Otherwise, he appreciated all what I did. Right. So I had full out support.
Right. So when you were 15 years old, you stated your life intention living in the Czech Republic was that you now want to be a Buddhist monk. Where did you go from there? How did you figure out what to do next?
I didn't. I was there like a blind man, knowing nothing. So I didn't have any friend. I was quite desperate. For 3 years, I didn't have any Buddhist friend. Then when I was 18, I searched online. I thought, like, now I need to go to monastery. Like, this has been enough, Like, of course, before the leaving school examination. And so I thought, like, I need to get rid of all this school. I don't want to sit for examination. I don't want to learn anything. So then I searched online, and I found out about this Zen monasteries and Buddhist monastery in Czech Republic, and I thought, yes, this is the place to go. So I sent to them an email that I'd like to go there and be a monk there, and somehow they sensed that I am not so much enthusiastic about Zen, and they found out that I like more Theravada. So then they say, well, no, in this case, please do not come to our monastery. We know a Theravada monk in Sri Lanka, and he certainly can help you. So they forwarded my email to him, and then he said, well, you need first to finish your school, and then we can discuss about this. So I said, okay. And then he sent to me the contact to his 10 students who were already in Czech Republic as lay people, as teaching meditation. And then they then responded to me that I can visit them and discuss with them about Dhamma. And then they taught me how to meditate, and we discussed long about whatever is the monk life and Buddhism and whatever were my questions. They answered them very well. And they are actually teachers in meditation retreats in Czech Republic. So thanks to them, I learned about meditation retreats in Czech Republic. And then I attended the meditation retreats, and there I got more and more Buddhist friends. And from there, I learned about Sri Lanka, about Myanmar. At that time, Myanmar still had some conflicts. So I decided for Sri Lanka. And that was the core of my progress on the path, because if the Zen monastery said, okay, you want to be a monk, welcome here, then maybe I would be a Zen monk now.
Right. Yeah. It's funny where life takes us. Yeah. So you finished your schooling in Czech Republic, and then from there you went to Sri Lanka?
I finished studying at the Catholic high school, and I met with a beautiful girl, and I fell in love with that beautiful girl, and we made plans for life as usually.
So that disrupted your spiritual plans at that point.
So I'm not sure whether it disrupted. It certainly, I can't even say it enhanced the spiritual life if I look at it now backward. So with her, we moved to a different place, and we had our apartment, which I rented. I was extremely successful in business. I sold cable TV, cable TV connections. So I was a house-to-house contract, agent. And I was immensely successful, and I got a huge amount of money for working just a little bit every day. That was after I finished at the school. So after I left Catholic high school, I immediately started studying English at the business English course, which was my dad's wish. Before I started studying at the business English school, business English course, it's a 1-year course, my dad spoke with me about my idea about becoming a monk. And I said, well, so I'm now going to finish this school and I want to become a monk. And he says, well, please stay 1 year more. Stay 1 year more. when you are here, when you study at school, I get more money from the government, so I can pay a debt for an apartment. And then when I pay a debt for a new apartment, we can sell the old apartment, and then I will give you enough money for everything you need. And then if you still want to become a monk, you can.
Okay.
So we had like an agreement with my dad. I totally forgot it, after like 6 months. But anyway, we had this agreement, and my dad actually fulfilled the agreement, even though we forgot about it. Anyway, after that 1 year at the business English school, I had this how to say that, this great income from the business at the UPC company. It's a European cable TV company, and with that money, I thought, okay, so now I have a girlfriend, but even with a girlfriend, I will get married, and when I'm married, I will work hard. I will take care of my wife. I will take care of my child or children. And then I will work hard, and I will try to make them happy, and then I will die. And then the idea came to me, like, now if I become a monk, then I will work hard, and I may get the psychic powers, and I may attain the ultimate bliss of Nibbana. So I thought, well, then the second option is better. So I thought, like, okay, so maybe I should become a monk, but I didn't know how to do it because my girlfriend loved me, and we had a very nice relationship, and I had so much money, and my dad loved her, and her mom loved me, I mean, like, we had very good relationships. Everything was just perfect, like a dream life. And then I thought, so how am I going to do it? I need to ask gods for help. So as I was in a block of flats, outside the flats somewhere, in the corridor, I thought, okay, gods, I want to become a monk. Help me, but may nobody suffer any physical suffering because of this, my decision, or because of your help. I didn't see anybody. I never spoke with gods. They never spoke with me. I don't know whether they are around me or somewhere else. I never saw them, apart from pictures. And I never had a direct contact with gods. But I thought, well, why not? Like, I will ask them for help, and in the worst case, they will not help me, So then after maybe a month, we are still like gradually getting things for our apartment, like buying new beds, buying new furniture, and so on. And we also ordered a beautiful bed from a company, but somehow we forgot about it. And before it would come, we ordered an air bed. Do you call it air bed? Like you blow air into it, and then you
air mattress.
Air mattress. And that is very cheap, and it's very nice. And so we were sleeping on that. And one night it happened that it ruptured. And when it ruptured, my girlfriend was not happy. And she was not happy. And then I was not happy that she's not happy. And we had a conflict. And then because of that conflict, it resulted that she left to her mother's place. And I sent her a message that if she can come back and take her things away. And I thought, yes, this is my time. So I immediately called my friend who has a land in Sri Lanka, and I said, hey, I want to go to Sri Lanka. I'm following with you, this December, like, let's go together. And when do you go exactly? And help me to get the flight ticket. And I started to arrange everything. And then I got the answer from my girlfriend, I don't want to leave you. I love you. So I had, like, the travel was arranged and the girlfriend was there. So then I, like, secretly continued arranging the trip as I was with the girlfriend. But I had my excuse, And then after like a month, she overheard my talking with my friend, And she was literally stupefied. Like, no, you must be joking. Like, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
And I told her, okay, so I will go to Sri Lanka for 3 months. And if I don't like it there during the 3 months, I will come back to you. And if I like it there, I will not come back. So because obviously I cannot know, like, how do I know whether I can like resist the Asian weather, and Sri Lanka is really hot.
Right.
How do I know whether I get a virus there or a sickness or a problem or social problem? I don't know. I don't know anything. So I wanted to like let it open, you know, like ready to come back. And so she also like was okay that maybe I may come back. So it was easier for her to like survive that. And during the next 3 months, it was 3 months to get ready and 3 months as like the testing period. So during the 3 months of getting ready, I closed up everything, all our insurances and everything, whatever was the payment for electricity and other things. I like changed it to her and paid everything for the next 3 months, including the rent and everything, so that she can, for 3 months, she doesn't need any money and she has everything that she needs. And I gave her everything, you know, like we bought new fridge and new whatever microwave, whatever we bought, everything was her. Everything was for her. And even before I left, I still bought her new things and whatever she needed. Because again, I had a lot of money. And my dad supported me with another large amount of money for the travel.
Right.
So then I left to Sri Lanka, and as soon as I came there, I knew that I'm not coming back. And so I sent her email. We kept a little bit in contact for the first 3 months. After 3 months, she knew for sure that I'm not coming back. She found a new boyfriend. I think now she's happily married. And then I continued in Sri Lanka. So that's how my dad, now back to your question, my dad actually had a problem with me becoming a monk. He didn't wish that. When I was going to go to Sri Lanka, when I needed just the last permission from my dad to become a monk, because if you want to become a monk, you need permission from your parents.
Right.
I told my dad, Dad, I need your permission, otherwise I cannot become a monk. And he says, but you first need to study at a university. And I say, well, I can study university in Sri Lanka as a monk. He says, well, I can pay for you Cambridge or Oxford. We have enough money for that. And I say, well, but I cannot study there as a monk without touching money. It's easier to study in Sri Lanka.
Right.
And he says, well, so do you want me to allow you to jump from a bridge? And I say, yes, please allow me to jump from a bridge. And then he says, well, then what to do? So I said, I need to get your written permission. So how should I write it? And my father dictated to me, you know, what to write in the note. So I have the note with me until today. And there is written like, I allow my son to work hard on his path to become a good person. That was what he dictated. And then I added, which means to become a Buddhist monk for undetermined period. And then my dad subscribed, like signed.
Right. And that's how you got to Sri Lanka. So then did you ordain in Sri Lanka?
I ordained as a novice. Now, to ordain, you can ordain as a novice. You can get higher ordination. In most cases, the adept first ordains as a novice, as a trial period, where the novice follows just 10 precepts. Most importantly, doesn't eat afternoon, doesn't enjoy multimedia entertainment, doesn't touch money. It's more complicated, but this is most prominent, most difficult out of it, and of course doesn't engage in any sexual intercourse, in any sexual activity. And then after a certain period, according to the teacher's decision, the novice can obtain the higher ordination. And when I was in Sri Lanka, I was ordained as a novice. And I stayed there as a novice for 4 years. I could get higher ordination much earlier, but when I learned about Myanmar, I thought I need to get higher ordination in Myanmar so that I have more freedom to travel and to speak with monks as like the Burmese monk, because I was ordained there.
So you were a novice for your 4 years in Sri Lanka, and then full bhikkhu when you came to Myanmar. And what I didn't quite understand your point in why you didn't want to seek full ordination in Sri Lanka. Why did you want to wait to Myanmar to do that?
Yes, in Sri Lanka, the idea of higher ordination is more of a reward rather than of a duty.
Mm-hmm.
In Myanmar, it's the other way. In Myanmar, if you are over 20, you need to get higher ordination.
Right.
So in Sri Lanka, you're basically tested. The novicehood is more of a test period. But the problem here is that I was 1 year as a novice, only around 6 months with my master, and this was not a sufficient period for him to decide. In Sri Lanka, usually you wait 1 year or 2 years or even longer to get the permission or to get the ordination. So after 6 months, according to my promise to my dad, I went to the university. And as I studied at the university, I was somewhere else, so not with my teacher. Hence, my teacher could not test me. So all of this idea that he could give me higher ordination is invalid because I'm not with him. He cannot test me. So I was somewhere else, and all the monks that I met in the university area were not monks who I would desire to be my preceptors for life. So then, even though I was suggested that I get higher ordination from elder monks, at that time I learned that there is Myanmar and that there might be fully enlightened monks in Myanmar. In Asia, when, or let's say for Sri Lanka, Myanmar, where I'm sure, in Sri Lanka and in Myanmar, when you get ordained, you basically become somewhat their national. You basically become part of them because even in our scriptures it's suggested that the monk who ordains you, your preceptor, is like your father, and or let's say like your mother, and the other monk who instructs you other things, whatever would be the secondary teachers, would be like your fathers. So you have like your mother and father, your parents in the monastic family, and so in that perspective, we can say that the monk is born into a new life.
Takes on the national identity there.
That would be the added feature, that if they are Sri Lankan monks who are ordaining me, then I would be somewhat Sri Lankan. If Burmese ordain me, then I'm somewhat Burmese.
Sure, yeah.
So like I ordained as a novice in Sri Lanka, so I'm somewhat Sri Lankan. Then I got higher ordination in Myanmar, so I'm somewhat Burmese. And I thought this is great because if I can wait until I go to Myanmar and get ordained in Myanmar, then I will have more freedom because they will take me as their monk, as the Burmese monk.
And why did you decide that you wanted to come to Myanmar and be a monk at all? Why not stay in Sri Lanka after the university and just continue on as a bhikkhu there?
In Sri Lanka, I didn't find a monk who I would totally trust. This again is dependent on my perception, of course.
Sure.
And I felt that in Myanmar I will find such monk. And I did find so many exquisite persons in Myanmar, not just monks, but also nuns and lay people. And so I came to Myanmar, I met those people, I was ordained. I was ordained very soon after I came to Myanmar.
You came as a novice or as a layperson?
I came as a novice, and I got the higher ordination right from the novice stage.
And you seem to really have a knack with languages. You put together dictionaries with Sinhalese and Burmese. I think you became fluent in Sinhalese there. You referenced one time giving a talk that was televised to 10 million people. Is that correct?
10 million.
Yeah. And then in Myanmar, you've also learned fluent Burmese, and you give discourses and meditation instructions to local.
I stayed with Burmese monks in the Sinhalese monastery when I still learned Burmese when I was still in Sri Lanka. And they helped me if I didn't know something. I was not a type who would follow a course with one teacher, but if I had a question, I would go and ask.
Right.
And so they helped me to understand pronunciation. Again, because I didn't have a teacher, who would teach me Burmese. On a regular basis, it was so distressing sometimes because I would learn a word with a pronunciation and I would then repeat it for myself, let's say 10,000 times or 1,000 times. And then when I came to Myanmar, nobody would understand. And with difficulties, I would find out that throughout the time I pronounced it wrong.
I see.
So this happened for so many words.
Oh.
So this is a big disadvantage, learning without a teacher or without a proper pronunciation, learning method.
Yeah.
So I already learned Burmese when I was in Sri Lanka to a good extent. I went through the Seaside EDU course. I went through a Burmese by ear, John Ockles course. I went through a software. I don't remember exactly how it's called, but it's like 105 short lessons. Each lesson teaches you like 6 new sentences, 6 new words. So that I went through, and then I created a Facebook account, my first real Facebook account. Until that time, I never had a Facebook account. Only one secret, so I can use script.com.
Oh, right.
So my first official Facebook account was opened so that I make Burmese friends and speak with them in Burmese. And that worked incredibly.
This was right when the technological revolution was coming to Myanmar, because this had been a closed country for a long time. Wi-Fi, internet, smartphones, none of that was here until just recently. So I guess your making your own account on Facebook coincided with actually Facebook coming to Myanmar en masse to everyone at the same time.
I see. It could be like 2011 when I made the account.
Right. You're actually probably ahead of the curve then.
So then there I immediately got many, many Burmese friends. And with them, I would, by messenger, I would talk with them about Burmese, hello, how do you do? And my system is through diary. In the beginning, I would make a diary in that foreign language. So I tried to make like a diary. First, I start like, I woke up at this time, then I went to sleep at this time. So is this right? Then they would correct the mistakes. I would write it again for the next day. And then if it is correct, I go a little bit more exact. I woke up at this time, I had meal at this time, I went to sleep at this time. And then a little bit more and more exact until I like explain and make stories, like what exactly happened, with whom did I talk, and what did I talk about, and what was the problem, what did I resolve.
So getting steadily more complicated in your expressions. Yeah.
Yeah. And this way I learned Sinhalese, this way I learned Burmese. And then when I see that the diary is, starts to have less and less mistakes, then I switch to books. So then I would start to read books. In Facebook, I would still not go to books. I was reading the posts, so the Burmese posts. I think it's really good to learn a language from Facebook, because the people are open and the language is so rich. You get there the written, the spoken, the vulgar, the official, the ethical, the teaching, everything is there.
Every part of it. Yeah.
So learning language from Facebook for me was so good, because I could really learn real Burmese.
Right. And it was probably also helpful because with Burmese specifically, there's quite a difference between normal written Burmese and normal spoken Burmese. There's a much greater difference than other languages. In other words, you can't pick up a normal book or newspaper and read that to understand how people speak in the world, because actually there's completely different grammatical structures that are only written and not spoken. But with something like Facebook, posts probably follow, there are books that follow an oral, the oral spoken form, but they're few and not many. Newspapers tend to not. But Facebook posts, I would imagine, in Burmese tend to follow much more the spoken, because it's a casual form. So that was a kind of a rare technological advance that allowed you to learn that part of the language. And so that's an interesting way to develop, using Facebook and diaries to just express yourself a little more, because it has to be said now. You write, you have an email newsletter, you answer questions on Facebook as well. People ask you, I've seen many of these, they ask you anything. They ask you something about some part of the Visuddhimagga or the Buddhist scriptures, or a meditation question, or something happening in contemporary Myanmar that they want to know about, or some recent historical incident or anything, and you give these comprehensive, these are all in Myanmar language, of the question and the answers, which you're writing yourself yourself and you give these comprehensive answers to whatever it is they ask. And then you've started doing Dhamma discourses as well. Some of these Dhamma discourses are, the number of times they're shared, they're liked, they're commented on. You're looking at hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of times.
3 million.
3 million.
Maximum.
Yep. So you're looking at millions of times. So you've gone in a very short time from just learning how to express yourself by saying, well, I got up at 9 o'clock and and then I will eat breakfast. Oh, no. Then you ate breakfast. Okay, right. Then I ate breakfast. And just getting that level of sophistication and meaning to suddenly giving a formal Dhamma discourse at the, with a topic that you really have to have a solid understanding of, both in terms of the content as well as in terms of how you're expressing it. This is these are the highest stakes really that you can have in terms of being correct in your language and usage. And now these are you're becoming something of a celebrity here with your the number of times it's being viewed and shared. So that's a very short jump.
Yeah, I go on a road, I go somewhere and people stop me and say, "Yeah, I know you from Facebook.
Yes,
I listen to your Dhamma."
Right.
We are visiting the Prime Minister now because we are building a new monastery
Of Myanmar.
Yeah, Prime Minister, not the Prime Minister of Myanmar, Prime Minister of the Yangon division. In Myanmar, each division has a Prime Minister. The Aung San Suu Kyi would be a counselor, not a prime minister per se. And so we visited the prime minister for Yangon division, and we were waiting until he comes. And his office workers, were coming to see me, and one by one came and said, "Yeah, I know you. I know you from Facebook. Yeah, I'm listening to your Dhamma. Yeah, I know you from internet." Like people were coming, and
And Facebook, and here in Myanmar, Facebook has become such the means of communication more than anything else. So once you tap into a communication or a messaging on Facebook, then that is the way to definitely take off, whether you're starting a new business or giving a Dhamma discourse. So that's the medium now.
Yeah. I wouldn't like the audience to think like that I want to become famous.
Sure.
My intention is to share Dhamma with those who are interested in it. And if the people are interested and they want to listen to me, then I don't see a reason why should I stop them. What is interesting factor here that the more people know you, the more careful you need to be about everything you say and do.
Have you had issues where that's come up, or you've realized that you haven't been as careful as you should have been? You didn't quite realize the stature and the reach that your words had at this point?
There was one case, and it is slightly distressing that one time you're not exact, and that is the time which makes you really famous. So a great master in Myanmar, the master who I appreciated most for his knowledge of the books, he taught me that monks who touch money are not monks. That was his words.
And who is this?
In Burmese. He doesn't wish, after this problem, he doesn't wish his name to be ever mentioned by me.
Sure, so some anonymous monk who taught you?
Right. And so he told this to me, and I thought, like, this is great. Like, this is the way how I need to explain everybody that monks shouldn't touch monks shouldn't touch money.
I think actually before going into the story, probably you should give some background to people who might not know about monasticism or the Buddhist teachings. So if you could back up just a few steps, maybe discuss what the Buddha had to say about monks touching money and what the contemporary reality here in Myanmar is before getting into your recent news about it.
Yeah, in the Buddha's teachings, monks should not touch money. The Buddha, when he learned that a monk touched money, he admonished him that he's a useless person. So we know from the Buddha's teachings that really monks are not supposed to touch money, and they are not supposed to buy things with money. They're not supposed to own anything that they bought with their money. And monks should follow their rules. If monks break their rules and they do not confess, they do not purify themselves through confessing it to another monk. If they do not purify themselves before death, then the belief is that they will not be able to to be born as a being in a pleasurable state, or even to attain enlightenment. And that is a very serious problem. So my idea is that monks, if they shouldn't touch money, and if this is such a serious thing, they should stop, and every monk should help every monk to follow the rules.
Sure. So just to back up a moment, so then the Buddha had an injunction that monastics in his order should not touch money or gold or jewels, things of value in this sense. For people who've never been to Myanmar, how is that rule interpreted or followed in present day Myanmar?
It's interpreted in the same way. It's just that the monks say we cannot follow it, and they just don't follow it. Mm-hmm. But they will say, yes, we should not touch money, but we cannot follow it. It's not possible to live without that.
Right. So most monks in Myanmar today do touch money in your estimation?
Yes, I could say my estimation is 98%, but it seems officially estimation is 80%.
So somewhere between 80 and 98%. I've heard 99.9%. So somewhere upwards of 80% of monks in Myanmar are touching money.
Yes, that's right. The problem is not just touching money. The problem is as soon as you touch money and you buy something with the money, which is what is expected from you, from a monk if he touches money.
That's what money is for. Right?
That's why they are given to the monk. Then all of that is also inappropriate. So using that every moment, using it is another offense, and that needs to be confessed. And no other monk is allowed to use it. So like if a monk touches money and he buys a land, he buys a building, then all that building and all that land is inaccessible to every other monk who follows rules.
Right.
And the Myanmar country is basically saturated by that kind of monasteries.
Right. So that would put a monk who very much wanted to follow the rule of not touching money, even if he was living that very ethical life, if he, by no fault of his own, were to accept food or visit monastery land, spend the night that was acquired
bought by another monk.
Right. Then
it's an offense. Yeah, it's just an offense.
Right.
Yeah, and that basically destroys, the purity of the Buddha's community. Mm-hmm. And so it's a very, very serious issue.
Okay.
And the monks who touch money, they do not realize how serious it is. Mm-hmm. So I started to teach about that monks should not touch money, that lay people should not give money to monks. Monk can have a steward, and a layperson can accept money from monks. And then if a monk needs something, then he asks the steward what he needs. Mm-hmm. So you could say, isn't that the same thing as accepting money? Well, it's not in terms of enjoying sensual pleasures. Mm-hmm. So if a steward is the one who who accepts the money, then of course a monk will not go to the steward and say, hey, buy me, a bottle of whiskey, mm-hmm. because the steward will not do that. Mm-hmm. Or the monk will be shy to ask for it. Or the monk will not go to a steward and say, hey, can you organize for me a prostitute for tonight, So, but if the monk is having the money himself, then there is nothing to stop him.
Well, those are, to kind of push back against that, those are kind of extreme examples. What about, what would be the difference of a monk saying, well, I have this money and I need to get a drink because I'm hot, or it's raining, I need to buy an umbrella. So because I'm holding this money, or I need to buy rice for my monastery, so I'm using it for that. What would be the difference between that and a monk physically never touching the money, but his steward holding it for him and turning to the steward and saying, this money which was given in my name, please buy this water, please buy this umbrella, please buy this rice for my monastery. So he's making ethical purchases, but what would be the difference between him directing a steward to do that and him actually holding it and doing it himself?
A monk is not allowed actually to ask a steward in this way, like buy me things or buy me that. The monk needs to be very careful, and the monk cannot ask the steward more than 6 times. If the steward doesn't do anything, even after sixth time saying, I need a rope or I need food, then the monk is not allowed to ask the steward anymore. He needs to go to the donor and tell the donor that the donation of the donor didn't bring any benefit to the monk. Mm-hmm. Actually, if the monk doesn't then inform the previous donor, the money donor, then it's an offense. So a monk needs to inform the donor. Now, the thing is that the monk who needs to ask a steward will ask less. If the monk holds the money, then the monk will certainly use the money more and collect them more and be more afraid of them. Like, where is he putting the money? What's happening with the money? He would need to have a treasure and have a key and that kind of thing, and be afraid of thieves. Whereas if it's kept with a steward, then the steward is responsible for that, and either the steward will bring what the monk needs, or the monk just tells to the donor, and the monk is not allowed to care about where does the steward keep that money. Mm-hmm. So this helps the monk to really dedicate the monk to the letting go and to be satisfied with what he gets.
Mm-hmm. So it helps him fulfill his monastic obligation of renunciation and only accepting what's given. So this catches us up to the Buddhist background and the Myanmar background. And you had mentioned that unwittingly you somehow found yourself in the middle of this, not realizing maybe what your stature was and how far your words travel. So now that the audience is up to speed on understanding the Buddhist injunctions as well as Myanmar culture, maybe you can tell us where your involvement with this fit in.
Yeah. So I started to teach that monks shouldn't touch money and that lay people should not give money to monks' hands, that they should, that if they want to donate something, then only to a steward. And this seemed to be okay. This seemed to be okay for a long, long, long time. And then I made a post in Facebook where because I wanted to get more knowledge, there was no offense intended, I wanted to get a list of monasteries in Myanmar where monks learn scriptures without touching money.
Right.
Because the main argument against not touching money was that you, direct to me, you did not study, education in an educational center in Myanmar.
Sure.
So you cannot understand that they always need to touch money. Mm-hmm. And my answer to this would be, well, there are centers of education, of monastic education in Myanmar where no monk touches money. Mm-hmm. So that's my answer. And now I need a list of those centers mm-hmm. so that anybody who would like to follow the Buddha's teachings just know where to go.
Sure.
If they want to be monastic and learn. Uh-huh. So I made a post like, hey people, I know only a few monasteries where they don't touch money. Are there any more? Please let me know in the comments.
And it should be said, this is not an unusual tactic for you when you want to find information. I know this from working together on our book, that when about any bits of information, we want to know where there's a certain kind of curry dish and we're not exactly sure the origins of that dish, something very, very minute like that. And I've seen you put questions out, hey, does anyone know about the origins of this curry dish? Or there's some village we're writing about where some arhat came from, and we have 3 different origin stories of that village, and we want to be able to trace it back. And you have so many followers and people that are helping you that you just kind of put these questions out there. Hey, we're kind of exploring this idea. Can anyone get back to me and give some feedback? So it sounds like it was in that similar manner. Yeah. That you weren't really looking to unsettle anything. You just, hey, this is the question I have now. Let me throw this out to my followers, see what comes back. But it sounds like this time you got something very different back than in other cases.
Yeah, I would never imagine that so many people, like lay people, they were just giving me the addresses, address, monastery. And I would like that one comment with the monastery address, here no monk is touching money, all of them follow Vinaya very well. And the next comment, it is not possible to live without touching money, this is not possible. And another comment, right. Some other person, hey, there is another monastery, they don't touch money at all, look at here, this is the address, this is the name. And then another comment of a monk, like, no way, like without money, how can they ever follow?
So it sounds like there were 2 different versions of reality being presented simultaneously. It sounds like they weren't even in this day of kind of fake news and, the own reality, whatever reality you want to promote being the one you can. It sounds like they're not even having an argument about a certain strain of logic or this monastery does it. No, I was there and I experienced this, but it sounds like it was just 2 completely different parallel strands of logic that were being that were being pushed out there at the same time.
Yeah, this was very rare that somebody would recommend a monastery for the list and the people would say, no, it's not. No, they don't follow the Vinaya. It was more like, as it seemed as if those monks who touch money didn't at all listen to the list that there are monasteries which follow the rules. And the lay people who knew the monasteries where they followed the rules, they absolutely don't care that other monks are not able, to live without money.
Right.
And my conclusion from that is totally different, and that's very, very dark conclusion. And that is that this kind of list creates a big problem for the monasteries where they don't follow the rules.
Yeah.
Because I basically advertise these monasteries which follow Vinaya and direct all the lay people, all the public to these monasteries and from all other monasteries.
Yeah.
And that's what they didn't like. And I would never have the idea that that somebody would not like this. I would never thought that the monks who have a monastery where they touch money, that they would not like making this kind of list. Because, of course, I totally accept that I'm very naive and very optimistic. And my idea was, well, if you want to be in the list, just stop using money and I'll add you there.
And it didn't really go that way.
And it absolutely didn't go that way.
So then when this kind of blew up, what was the reaction?
Yeah, the problem didn't arise from the list. The problem arose from my reaction to the reaction of these monks.
And what was your reaction? What you just explained that?
And my reaction was that I deleted the introduction to the list, and instead I said, to totally curb all of the dissatisfaction. I said, monk who touches money is not a monk. Monk who touches money is not the Buddha's son. It's not like the Buddha's follower. And monk who touches money is useless. And that's
Those
what the
are pretty
Buddha
strong
says.
words.
Yeah, and then I would add that this is what the Buddha said, and this was the core of all of this problem. The list would not be a problem by itself. This would, after some time, it was silent down.
It was the commentary about the list.
Yes,
and those are pretty strong things to say. So you got quite a reaction from that.
Yeah. Now the problem is that the Buddha didn't say that the monk who touches money is not a monk. The Buddha says the problem is that this is an understanding of lay people from the Buddha's time who heard the Buddha's words. So you could say that indirectly it's the Buddha's word, because that's how people who spoke in the Buddha's language understood the Buddha's words. But it is not exact, and that's where they could take me for a word. And that's what they did. So I, of course, have shown that this, what I have written, number one, I learned from a monk who memorized 3 and 5, 8 books of the Tipitaka. So very, very important monk. This is from whom I heard it, so it's not my invention. And second, it is actually in a book from a great Burmese that monks who don't follow all the rules are not monks, exactly in that wording. And so I could substantiate that what I said is right. But it's late. So at that time when I wrote it too short, everybody could take me for a word. And all the subsequent explanations which I gave in the other posts, they were no way as famous. So the monks then, but again, looking at it more as a darker problem from the darker standpoint, it seems that the monks do not like to be spoken of as wrong if they touch money, so they simply remove all my credibility by saying this monk says that monks who touch money are not monks, which is not in accordance with scriptures. He knows nothing. We know it. He's wrong. We are right. And that way they remove my credibility and can continue in whatever they do. So they basically misuse this my shortening, which is okay. I do not need to add scriptural reference when I ask somebody, please don't kill. I do not need to say in which book and which page is that written. I do not need to say, hey, please stop stealing. The Buddha said that we should not steal. But I do not need to add, reference in which page, which book, and when did he say it. So in the same way, I do not need to say, that monks who touch money are not noble monks. In this case, I said they are not monks. But this is exactly the answer to your question, whether I was misunderstood in Myanmar. In Myanmar, we need to understand that people have certain meanings applied to certain expressions. And monk who touches money is not monk actually means that he's a layperson.
Right.
And it actually means that they committed the heinous crime of parajika, such as killing, stealing.
And that was never what you meant.
And that was never, ever what I meant.
Right.
I meant like, hey, the Buddha said that if monk touches money, he's not a monk. Therefore, please stop touching money. So you are a monk.
In other words, a defining characteristic of being a monastic is that you have given up the touching of money.
And that is what the Buddha actually said. The Buddha said, a monk doesn't touch money. And he said it in different synonyms, So it's like really clear. A monk doesn't touch money. If he is a monk, he doesn't touch money. So what I said would be basically correct, but in this exact wording, it was easily twisted around and used against me. So the monks who touch money can say that, no, this Ashin Sarana, he knows nothing, we do it right.
Right, and we should say this was a really big deal when it happened. Casually, when I was talking to my friends, many people knew about it. It was something that many people were talking about, and that was known and that was debating was what you had written and how it was being interpreted and how people were responding to it and how it was going to be resolved. And it was, although there's no such thing as kind of a monastic newspaper or a monastic, journal that everyone kind of reads the dailies of, that's kind of what Facebook has become. And in that sense, there were a lot of people that had never met you or had no contact with you that were just kind of following the day-to-day to see what was going on and how it was being resolved. And I know, people, your friends were definitely concerned for you, and that you were the focus of something that obviously you probably wasn't very comfortable to be in that position.
Yeah, what followed actually was that a monk decided to submit me to a monastic court, so that I'm like sued for this. Because I said some more things as I was explaining. I added some more ideas, such as that monks who touch money are worse than Devadatta, and Devadatta was the monk who tried to kill the Buddha.
That's a pretty extreme thing to say.
Yes. And I said that monks who touch money destroy the Buddha's teachings, and that was actually approved as correct, as is. And monks who touch, that there is no more danger for the Buddha's for the community of the Buddha students and for the teachings than touching money, which was also approved later by educated monks. And then I also said that monks who touch money are actually Mahāvihāra. So I basically tried to find the weak spots, of the monks and shoot there. And so a monk took these 5 things and he submitted me at a monastic court for these 5 things. Now, he's not at all knowledgeable in the things, and that's why he was admonished during the court meeting for his ideas, for what did he submit me for. Anyway, he also twisted my words. For the first thing, monk who touches money is not a monk. In brackets, he says he is a fake monk, and that I never said. And again, that gives a very different meaning. Fake monk and not monk are totally 2 different things.
That's right.
In the we say like legal wording. So he added that. He was admonished for that as well. And before I attended the monastic court meeting, it is literally meeting. So it didn't have any intention, and it could not at that level because it was just at the township level. It wouldn't have any power to stop me from teaching or to curb my teaching in any way. But it had the power to admonish me, to say, hey, don't do this, don't do that. And before I came to that court, I wrote a book. Where I explained these 5 things with all references from Burmese, from Pāļi scriptures. And when I brought the book there, we basically read the answers from the book. So
you were very well prepared.
I was so lucky also to know these 5 things before, which we learned from somewhere around. And so I was able to get very well prepared. And when the monks who were examining me, when they saw this book, they couldn't believe that it was written by me. And I was also a little bit lucky for being a foreigner, so I was allowed to have an interpreter. And as an interpreter, I chose a great Vinaya master from a monastery where they follow all the rules. So he was basically speaking for me, and in Burmese, he's Burmese. So I was so lucky to have, this fantastic support. Nobody else in the court would be allowed to have an interpreter or anybody, to follow with them. So I had, this is such a stressful factor, being alone, examined by seven monks. So I was lucky to have there a very good friend, knowledgeable friend who was totally on my side. And so he explained to them that all what I said, all the 5 things are correct, and they accepted them as correct. And then the problem was that if they are not explained, they lead to misunderstanding. So rather than understanding that my intention is just that the monks stop using money, the monks in Myanmar, many monks understood it as that I'm basically explaining that they are not monks, that they should just dedicate themselves to lay life. And that's a totally different thing, totally different interpretation. So the monks, the leading monks of the township, I think 7 monks or 6 monks, they made a decision for me. Like it's written as like a contract, or decision, official decision, where I'm prohibited to say these 5 things, but it's not even mentioned these 5 things. So nobody can say what I'm actually prohibited from saying things, because it just says those things which Ashin Sarana said, he will not say them again in Facebook or YouTube, and he will explain them in Facebook and YouTube. So not only that I would be maybe prohibited from saying these 5 things, but nobody knows whether these 5 or 1 or 2. So anything. But it's attached to the main paper which accuses me, So everybody would actually find out that it's about these 5 things and nothing else in the maximum, So I'm not allowed to say these 5 things alone, because that can lead to misunderstanding, as was the main decision of the main monks there. And I signed that I will explain these 5 things. So not only that, I was also encouraged to continue teaching Dhamma, to continue teaching meditation, to continue teaching that monks should not touch money. I was encouraged by the leading township monks, So, and I signed it, and they signed it, So like, nobody can ever say that when I explain why monks shouldn't touch money, why monks who touch money are not monks, why monks who touch money are worse than Devrata. Whenever I explain it, I just follow what I signed up. I just follow the decision of the masters. So now the table is like totally turned,
I see.
I can now teach anything at all if it is and according to scriptures. Just I need to be careful that if I say these 5 things, I need to always add explanation.
Yeah, so I hope you haven't said anything incriminating in our last 30 minutes of podcast, that you're safe in this conversation.
Well, I did say all of the 5 things actually, but I didn't. But I explained them. I explained my intention, so I just followed what was decided by the great monks.
Okay, so as long as you're following the letter of your contract and you haven't incriminated yourself on air,
perfectly fine.
You're in good position. So, do you have any? I think the interesting thing about this moment was that actually I wasn't intending to get here and talk about it at this time, but it came naturally because we were discussing your Burmese language. It came from your Burmese language. Right. It came from joining Facebook to be able to experiment with just describing what you did through the day. And then when we were working together, I recall how you would use it to just gather information from people who knew. And then you used it in this same way to learn about monasteries that were following a certain aspect of Vinaya, and this thing kind of exploded and went into that issue in detail that just happened. Looking back on it now, do you have any regrets or things you would have done differently about how you handled it?
Yes. I should have written it more accurately. I shouldn't have written like that. The Buddha said that monks who touch money are not monks. I should have said that the Buddha said that monk is the one who doesn't touch money. If I wrote this, all of this story would be totally different.
Right. So does this inform you or teach you anything going forward? Now that you kind of know the platform you have, it kind of takes something to blow up to realize how far your reach is and what the impact is. Does this will this change or modify your approach going forward?
It did a lot. Like I'm now much more careful to read commentaries, sub-commentaries for everything before I say something new, that I am not 100% sure that I have well studied with all the details. And I add much more references and much more quotations than before.
Right. Do you think that now that you've kind of brought this, maybe unwittingly or unintentionally, but you really brought this subject into the fore of Burmese Buddhist society, it was something everyone was talking about just a month ago. Do you think that this could have any effect of changing the way that this rule is being followed or not followed? Have you seen anything that would suggest that?
For me, there is a big change because thanks to this problem, I learned about monks who don't touch money. I learned about thousands and thousands of monks who don't touch money. I got in touch with fantastic monks who follow all the rules and who know all the rules and follow them without any difficulty, without any exception.
Oh, that's great.
So I learned about like whole communities of these monks. I have all their full out support. They absolutely support everything what I said. They absolutely support me with all of what I said. They're absolutely disagreeing with all that court meeting and with all that disagreement and whatever the monks try to twist my words. And this is, I believe this is worth it. I think this is worth it. Of course, there will be more careful to add more references and quotations, citations. But this one time, this was worth it because I got such a fantastic support that I cannot dream of if any other way.
Sure. And you mentioned that you did make contact with many monks and communities you didn't know existed that are really carefully following this. Do you plan to do anything with that connection, to build anything with that relationship or that knowledge?
Yeah, basically, we are basically partnering. At this moment, is more of a one-sided partnering, but there is a possibility from our side to help because they're only pariyatti or only education monks, most of those who I know. So from our side, we can provide them with meditation, with a place where they can meditate, following all of the rules. And it's more free, without any particular special rules. And we are good friends, we are like on the same tune, and that's much better. There would be like two main communities in Myanmar who follow all rules: Mahāvihāra and Pa-Auk. And Mahāvihāra and Pa-Auk are slightly different. And the way how I live, the way of my understanding of the rules, it's more in tune of the Mahāvihāra style.
Pa-Auk is more of a teaching monastery, more of a meditation monastery.
That's right.
And
Mahāvihāra is more of the education.
Education, right.
Yes, Pa-Auk also has education centers and education possibilities, though. Now, the thing is that there are slight differences which are sometimes taken a little bit maybe too much seriously. So because I'm more in tune with Mahāvihāra, then it's easier for us to support Mahāvihāra monks with
How big
meditation.
is the Mahāvihāra network in Myanmar?
I think now 5,000. I think 3,000 to 5,000 for sure.
And outside of that network, did you also make contact with monks and communities that are following?
Of course, Pa-Auk, number one, Pa-Auk, with a lot of Pa-Auk monks. I got the opportunity to meet with a lot of very good Pa-Auk monks thanks to this problem. Right. And I met many monks who are not affiliated neither to Mahāvihāra nor Pa-Auk. Great old senior Siados, senior masters, and I've got so much of fantastic support, mental support, psychic support. And the interesting thing here is that I, thanks to this support from Mahāvihāra, not only that I got this Vinaya master to support me during the monastic court meeting, he is actually one of the main Vinaya teachers in the Mahāvihāra school. But I also now can do all these official things, registering and everything. And if I want to ask about building buildings and following rules, which I didn't memorize yet, I can always ask for their help. And if I don't know something, they can always support me, and I can be totally sure that we understand each other.
Right. So it's kind of interesting because you never really meant to start a movement or make a collection or collaboration of people. You were just kind of going about your daily business of Dhamma discourses, question and answer newsletters, Facebook posts, and somehow this happened. And through this happening, it led to you inadvertently making this connection with kind of a collaboration community of monastics, some of which are in these two big networks of Mahāvihāra and Pa-Auk, and some of which are smaller communities outside. But you now, through this happening accidentally, you can say you now have this collection and contact with a number of these peoples going forward. So does that are you thinking about further collaboration?
Yeah, actually the Vinaya master has given quite a number of talks which are recorded as a video. So my idea was that I could promote them. Now I am at the level where I can actually promote somebody else, which is a very nice feeling. And we have a whole group of young men who are well trained to do subtitles for videos. And when a video has subtitles, it works much better in Myanmar because Burmese is so sloppy in pronunciation that subtitles always help for any Burmese, not just for me.
So these are Burmese videos with Burmese subtitles.
We make the subtitles for their Burmese videos. And then I can promote those videos anywhere I want. We can make books with these things because the boys, I actually trained them in making subtitles for videos. They're making them especially for my Dhamma videos, of course, but we can make them for others. And we've done that already. We've done quite a videos like that with subtitles, and then took just the subtitles and made them into a book. So the book can be published, the video can be promoted. And that's very good. So that's how much we can help them. We can also help them by teaching English, but that still didn't start. That's still just planned. And we can also help them teach meditation or provide them with a place for meditation that also hasn't started yet. On the other hand, they help us. They already help us with all these law things and all these official things. So let's say if yogis come to my new monastery, not this one where I'm right now, because that is under a different monk, but the new monastery is entirely dedicated for me only and my students.
Where will this be?
That will be close by to the one where I stay now. It's in Legu.
So a couple hours north of Yangon.
Yes, to 1.5, maybe even 1 hour far from you. It's closer to Yangon.
Sure. Right. So this has become quite a mission for you. And I guess I'd be curious to know of all the different aspects of your own monastic experience in Myanmar, your knowledge of the way Burmese Buddhism is practiced. It sounds like this particular thing has been a real sticking point and important thing to follow through on and to look at making some changes. Why this issue is, I guess, what I'm curious about. Of all the things out there, why is this something that you find so important and critical?
If monks buy something, nobody else can use it. And if monks buy monasteries and lands, then nobody can enter. No monk can enter the monastery. And then how do you want to call this? A Buddhist community. Like they basically split. And that's why I said that they are worse than Devadatta, because the Devadatta split the community. He said like, these are my monks, and he played himself as a Buddha. And to me, it seems like that, because these monks basically, by buying their things, they split the Sangha, they split the community into the monks who touch money and buy things and the monks who don't touch money and who follow the rules. And having the two communities like this, it's very difficult because they do not cooperate. Like the monks who follow the rules, they do not want to do the recitation of rules with the others. They do not go. They don't want to go for donations, for offerings with the other monks. I went with a monk, from Pa-Auk tradition around a monastery where monks touch money, and we're just like 200 meters far from it. Like we never visited it. They never told us anything, and the monk just says, "Hey, these monks, they touch money. That's so bad, isn't it?" Like, what? They didn't do anything. So you can see how much they're splitted, and that's so distressing. That should not happen, in the Buddha's teachings. So this is a big problem. Monks, unfortunately, both of the both groups look the same way and behave pretty much the same way.
They wear the same clothes, of
They
course.
wear the same clothes. They
have the same hairstyles. Yeah.
Yeah. So then people, when they see these monks who touch money, as they're waiting on bus station and collecting money for their monastery into their hands and asking people, you need to give us money, otherwise this is not right. And monks who are renting their monastery or who buy a land and then they rent it for shops, and monks who enjoy with ladies, who have babies and so on. Then when people know about these, they think, aha, monks are like this. They don't think like monks who touch money are like this. No, they never think like that. They think monks are like this. And then they lose faith. Then they do not study the Buddha's teachings. They do not meditate. They do not work on their path. And in Myanmar, if you're not Buddhist, then it's you're basically empty, because you don't have any direction. It's like me, before I learned Buddhism.
Right. So you find it's degrading the whole possibility of the Buddhist teachings on the promise of liberation.
That's right. That's right.
Right.
So I would like to make it clear that monks who are doing this are not doing it right, and that lay people can support them in this. If the lay people don't give any money into the hands of the monks, they will not have them. So we can. So there is a way how lay people can support this, and that's why this can be well supported in Facebook, where is the audience complete. So my first. I didn't know that monks will be so much interested in my teaching. I thought like monks certainly don't care because I'm a foreigner. I haven't been here as a monk for longer than like 8 years, so certainly they will never care. But it turned out that they do care a lot. So mainly my teaching was for lay people. I taught lay people, hey, lay people, do not offer money into the monk's hands. Wait until he has kapya. If he doesn't have a kapya, if he doesn't have a steward, assistant, then you need to get a phone number of his donor and speak with his donor, but never give money to his hand.
So this is a kind of awareness that you're trying to encourage in Burmese people and Burmese donors. And yeah, I've had the experience, of being in downtown Yangon. Obviously, I'm not a monk. I don't look much different than normal backpackers or expats that are living here. And so there's nothing about me that would look like I would know anything more or less about Buddhists and monks than the normal tourist here. So with that background, I've had the experience of being in downtown Yangon or in some kind of tourist spot like Inle Lake and having Burmese novices come to me with their begging bowl saying, money, 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 thinking that
I didn't know that.
Yeah, right. And boy, are they in for a surprise, because when that happens, I just unleash a torrent of Burmese of saying, you think just because I look like this and that I don't know these rules that you're breaking your precepts and that you're acting in a way that is not fitting of the robes that you're wearing, and they just can't run away fast enough. But the thing is I'm, of the foreigners they come and talk to, I'm one in a million that would be able to speak the language and know the rules and give them that kind of admonishment. When I do that, there's often a number of Burmese around. I've told that story to others, and they say, well, boy, how do the other Burmese relate to this foreigner kind of, admonishing this young monk and kind of sending him running away? And the answer is they love it. They absolutely love it. They love this kind of moral and ethical response to keeping someone in line. But then the question comes, why does this keep happening? Why in a society that's so devoutly Buddhist, where the monkhood is so privileged and people are so devout, and every morning the monks' alms rounds goes in poor villages where people are giving the best of the foods they have, and this is the esteem they hold them in. Why has this been such a problem to keep under wraps, that you have novices that are representing the religion to foreigners that have never seen a monk before and don't realize that it's abnormal for them to beg for money directly to go into their begging bowl, or that that there's so many monks in Myanmar, whatever the number is, whether it's 80% or higher, that it's such a high percentage that are unwilling or unable to follow such a basic rule. So I think the question for someone who doesn't live here or is interested in the practice is, why is this so hard to follow? Why is it so hard to rein in?
And because the people have these 5 immeasurables. Ananto Ananta Ngava. And these 5 immeasurables are very much followed here. They are the Buddha, the Buddha's teachings, the Buddha's community, the parents and teachers. So these 5 are immeasurable. So they're like always right.
Right. So it doesn't leave room for the critical thought or examination
right.
or change. Yeah. Right. I remember another incident. I was going to a Buddhist site somewhere in the country. I won't say which one. And before I walked in, there were 2 monks sitting at a table, and they said, "This is the charge for money," and stuck their hand out. And I was shell-shocked. It's one thing for a meditator, for a foreign meditator, to have to pay their money to enter a site of devotion. That itself is painful enough. But it's another thing when you are forced to hand that money to a monk who is demanding it into his hands to be able to walk in. So you're basically paying, you're going to the site for your own devotion and practice. And you have to, because of the color of your skin and the flag on your passport, you have to pay money to access it. But then if that's not bad enough, you have to help a monk break his precept and break his Vinaya as well in order to access it. And I explained to them in Burmese, I said, I'm very uncomfortable doing this because I understand the injunction against monks touching money. And by access, I very much want to access the site and to show my reverence, but I don't want to help you break your Vinaya. And they said, don't worry about that. They said, that's nothing for you to worry about. We're monks and we know the rules, and they're not rules for you to have to worry about. And I said, but I am worried about this because I have foreign friends that are monastics, and I see how they follow the rules, and I see how I as a lay person can support or not support another monastic of following the rules. And as much as I want to see the site, I don't want to take an action which is helping you break those rules. And I know that monks can't touch money. And their response again was that it's not my place to wonder about these things, and that because they wear the robes, they know what's allowed and what's not, and if they say it's allowed, then it's allowed. And so I didn't see the site.
Yeah, there is a place like this in Shan State, a beautiful large caves where are monks who collect money, as the entrance fee. Like, I totally understand that entrance fee needs to be collected so that the place, so the site, can be repaired and supported and prepared for new visitors and cleaned and so on. And I think that this is a great way how somebody can support the site, and if the Burmese people are not ready to do that, then the foreigners can appreciate the fact that this site is also open for the foreigners and they can support it. Like, I believe that this is very good. But as soon as it's the monk who is in charge of this, that is seriously disgusting. So I have experienced this kind of thing, and this was particularly unpleasant. But at that time, I didn't have that much of knowledge that I have now. So now the thing what you can say is that if a monk touches money, then the monk is not able to attain Nibbana, and this is the Buddha's teachings. So I am not going to hinder your path toward Nibbana, and a monk is not allowed to touch money. Me as a monk, I am actually allowed to come and tear. Do you say that? Tear all those collected money from those monks. I can tear them and destroy them. I am entirely allowed to do that.
Have you done that?
I have never done it.
Would you do that?
I think I don't have enough stony heart for that. But I was thinking about it so many times, sure. I cannot count.
And if you got a lot of attention for that Facebook post, I can only imagine how viral videos of you tearing other monks' money would go.
Yeah, but again, I don't do Facebook to become famous or viral.
Sure.
So I do not consider things whether they would become viral or not as much as possible. I consider them whether they would be inspirational or not.
Right.
So, hey, if I tear money, then what will the people think about me as the teacher of loving kindness, about the teacher who teaches peace,
Yeah.
And even though it is absolutely specifically allowed in our rules, it's a commentarial explanation because There was a case when a monk, built a hut from mud. He baked mud, and the Buddha saw it, and he said, "But during baking mud, there are so many animals dying. So he ordered the other monks, to break the hut. And then the commentary says, if a monk has something that's not allowed, then another monk who understands the rules, and I'm absolutely sure that I am, and I was actually also certified as one who knows the rules by my own preceptor, then that monk who knows the rules is allowed to destroy that thing which is not allowed to the monk, such as money. And so I would absolutely be allowed, and it would be very easy to provide all the citation page and number and everything. But again, people will not be interested in explanations. People will see a monk who is tearing money,
Sure.
and they will think, hey, what is happening to our dear Myanmar? Monks now are destroying things of other monks. And
you have to be careful.
It looks more like an apocalypse
Yes.
rather than as attempt to make everybody peaceful.
Right.
So although it is allowed, I would certainly not do it. And if I ever happen to do it, then I would never like it, to become famous, because people would never understand, even with 1,000 explanations, this doesn't work.
Right.
We need to be careful. So the only thing that I could theoretically do is that I would explain to the monks that they are breaking the rules, and that they shouldn't do this. And that's basically everything I can do, unless I would know the chief of the place, and the chief of the place, if the place would, let's say that the chief of the place would be a layperson, and I would know that person, and that person would be my devotee, then I would say, okay, you cannot do this to the monks. And you say, yes, Venerable Sir, he would kick them off immediately. That's very easy. But if I don't know the chief of the place, and if he's not my devotee, it doesn't work. Then what happened was that we actually, I don't remember whether it was, I think it was actually free for me, because I'm monk anyway. I don't remember the details. But there were some people following with me, some lay people, and they, of course, had to pay. And I really, really didn't like this. And so then we were waiting for the monk who is he's a novice, who is responsible for all the place. There are some stories of gods and so on related to the stories, to the cave, and the novice. The novice apparently met with gods in the cave who stayed there. And they didn't wish that the novice meditates in that cave. So it's a huge, huge complex of caves.
Shan State?
Yes, it's in Shan State. It's in the South Shan State. I don't remember the name. And then the novice is therefore very famous because he met with those gods there. And then the novice appointed a different place for the gods. And that is totally closed up, and nobody is allowed.
This is a story we tell in the guidebook, I think. I think this was the research trip you took for some
that
of
is
the pages
possible.
that we wrote. So,
that is possible, yes.
Right, I remember that.
Yeah, and we wanted to speak with the novice, but he happened to be meditating, and we of course would not disturb the novice in meditation. That would go against all of my principles. So we are waiting there for him, and we were trying to call other authorities regarding the place. We couldn't call them up. He didn't open the door, and so we just left, and it was all useless. But I don't think that this is the way to resolve a problem anyway. Now, suppose that the novice would find out about this. I would explain to him that this is wrong. He would kick them off, and he would apply lay people. And then that's it. There's nothing special, like this. Nobody would care. Okay, so there are monks. Of course, they shouldn't be there. There should be lay people. Everybody would agree. Nobody would say a word. And it's immediately silenced because nobody cares. This is not the way to resolve it. My solution is different. My solution is that from the government there should be a decision that all educational centers, all monasteries should prohibit touching money, and those who don't prohibit touching money will not be officially recognized as an educational center for monks. That will entirely change all that
Would
situation.
that be the role of a lay government or of senior Sangha members?
This is the role of the lay government.
Why would that be the role of a lay government as opposed to the senior members in the Sangha, who traditionally it's their job to police their own monastic organization, which falls out of lay structures? I mean, in Myanmar history, there's been a number of precedents where the lay authorities have gotten a little too enthusiastic in monastic details, whether it's the purification of the Sangha or monastic education or some part of Vinaya regulation. And often there's a pushback from within the Sangha that, hey, you run your body, we run ours. So why would you suggest, in this context, why would you suggest that you would actually like to see the lays taking greater charge of Sangha matters than within the Sangha itself?
Yeah, it starts from the lays. Of course, it must be made, but the monks will be those who would prohibit touching the money anyway.
Well, not like you, though. There's monks who don't touch money. Why would it have to come from the lays? Why not from within the Sangha, from top to bottom or bottom to top?
Yeah.
Why couldn't it be handled directly there? Because there has been this historic concern that when lays start to become too interested in a body that they're not part of, that the Sangha loses its independence, which is believed to go back to the Buddha, the primary teacher himself.
There is a very, very shameful problem, and that is that the leading monks, the most leading monks in Myanmar, also touch money. Mm-hmm. So it can go only from the government, which knows that monks should follow the rules. Mm. There are some monks from the leading level who don't touch money, though. And that I know 100%. And I know them personally, some of them. But the problem is that if the government makes the push to these leading monks that they should prohibit it, then these leading monks can do it. If the government doesn't make the push, then these leading monks will say, hey, I'm a leading monk, so I can touch money, which is absolutely wrong. And they will just not make any such decision. So the government is responsible for registrations. So the government is responsible for registration of these monasteries as a monastery, as a monastic position of the land, as the monastic land of the monks who stay there. The government is responsible for recognizing monasteries as monastic. So they do not, collect tax and so on from them. And whatever you do as a registration of monastery, it always, now because I'm going to have a new monastery, I know all these things. So if the government doesn't like it, if the ministry doesn't like it, which is all run by lay people, you can do nothing. There is no monastery possible. But if the monks don't like it, it doesn't matter. If the ministry likes it and the monk doesn't like it, it doesn't matter. If the monk likes it, but the government and ministry doesn't like it, you can do nothing. So in Myanmar, really for monasteries to be registered as monasteries, it always goes through the secular portion. And if the secular portion will say, we cannot register your monastery, or we cannot keep your monastery registered if you do not officially prohibit touching money to both monks and novices, so like every monastery would have to have a sign that no touching money is allowed to monks and novices here. So if every meditation center, if every educational center, it's especially for educational centers, because meditation centers do not have this problem that much. They just follow the rules usually. Then if this is done, then it's so much easier, because the novices, are taught to touch money. Like the novice will never have the idea to touch money. Right. So if the government decides that all this decision must be there, otherwise it cannot be understood officially as a Theravada monastery, then this would be a big blow and they would have to change.
Right. Great. Let's take a break there. I'm especially excited to bring you the guest that we have coming up. But before doing so, I want to offer sincere gratitude for those listeners who have supported our effort. Thank you. Without your generous contribution, we would not be able to do what we're doing now. And if you have not yet donated, we'd like to take a moment to remind everyone that our work is 100% listener supported. In fact, no team member receives full remuneration for their work. Some volunteer all of their time, while others offer a massive discount for their professional services. But even so, every episode we produce has a cost. Any contribution of any amount that you make towards Insight Myanmar will allow us to continue our work and pump out more content for meditators related to the Dhamma in the Golden Land. If you find the Dhamma interviews we are sharing of value and would like to support our mission, we welcome your contribution. You may give via Patreon at www.patreon.com/insightmyanmar, as well as via PayPal at www.paypal.me/insightmyanmar. In both cases, that's Insight Myanmar, one word, INSIGHTMYANMAR. If you are in Myanmar and would like to give a cash donation, please feel free to get in touch with us. You may want to reflect a little more deeply on some of the themes explored in the last discussion. Following every interview, my friend Zach Hessler and I take some time to process the depth of what was said. Zach has been to Myanmar on numerous occasions and spent 3 years here as a forest monk, and so we hope that our talk can add depth and context to the interview. He's now living in rural Thailand, and I'll just make a quick call on Skype to connect with him now. Hey, Zach, how you doing?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, okay. So good to connect with you this week. We're talking about U Sarana, someone that we both have a bit of a history on.
Right. Bante's played quite a role in my life as a monk in Myanmar. He was there from the very first time I came to visit you at Shui Min. He was instrumental in helping me stay there with a tourist visa. I owe him actually quite a debt of gratitude for really giving me time and teaching me Burmese. He gave me about half an hour a day for almost a year, as long as I committed to studying 3 hours a day minimum. That was our deal. And and that whole section on learning languages reminds me I really need to get on my Thai learning.
Yeah, right. Language learning is definitely something that opens a lot of doors when you're in other countries, certainly when you're in Southeast Asia. And it was interesting for me to hear his story. I knew the broad strokes of it, but I guess one way to think about it is that, like, if you say you have you know your grandfather or something, or some teacher from school, and you just kind of know who they are in that mode of life, and when you think about them being a younger person that brought them from where they were before to where they are now, then it opens up what you think you know of the person. And for me, I've never known U Sarana outside of robes, and so his whole personality and his and who he is in Burma is everything of which I've always known him. And so to hear this background story of how he got there, and being an adolescent, being a child, being a teenager, going through college, early 20s, that was just very interesting to hear those steps that led him to where he is now. And the roadblocks were quite interesting. He didn't know any Buddhists. He wanted to meet these Buddhists in Czech Republic, and it took him a long time just to make a simple Buddhist friend. The feeling closer and more attached to his girlfriend, possibly becoming a wife, and not knowing how to get out of that. His dad not giving permission, or initially being hesitant to want to give permission to become a monk and wanting to encourage going to university. When you see U Sarana now, you just have a feeling this is what this guy was born to be. This is who he is. And so to hear about some of those challenges, and the challenges were somewhat unusual, in the pleasures they were offering him, and to hear what they were and how he developed in them to be who he is now, which is all I know of him, was quite interesting for me.
Right. For me too. I've never heard some of those stories or certain aspects of those stories, but it was nice to hear it flushed out. I got a few different pieces and some new angles on it. So yeah, great. Another thing I thought was fascinating in that early part of once he did make the connections to Buddhism, the interest in becoming a Buddhist monk because of the psychic powers, the higher psychic powers that they could achieve. Then he started to read some Buddhist text, and he talks about that one on impermanence. It's such he really come to life when he was explaining that part, right? It was so charming. When the Buddha said, "Is it permanent or impermanent?" And the Buddha says, "It's impermanent." And he's asking, is it really impermanent? And he's just so fascinated by the question and the answer. And then it just never, it's like there's a part of him that really woke up there not with conclusions, but with fascination and interest. just something, came alive in him. So I thought that was really charming.
I really appreciated his honesty in that section as well, of just his complete bafflement of what the answer would be and why it would be that way. Because there's this, sometimes when you're reading these texts, there's this kind of call and response issue going on. And call and response can also kind of compel you to want to answer what the crowd's answering. And his just naked vulnerability and honesty of the time when he was reading it, of just absolutely not knowing and yet being on the edge of his seat. I found charming, also inspiring as well. Just how open he was with how much he didn't know.
Right. Yeah, that part really touched me.
But another thing I wanted to mention was I was really struck by this idea of the media narratives that were going on. I'm actually jumping quite a bit now. I realize we're talking about his early development, and I've now kind of fast forwarded into when he starts to talk about this controversy that hit him, the whole second half of the interview that arose from a seemingly mundane decision of wanting to get better at his Burmese by having Burmese friends on Facebook and talking, and it developed into this huge narrative, this huge issue of the monks touching money that he describes in such detail. And just to take a moment to talk about Facebook in Myanmar and its role here, it's hard to live in Myanmar without Facebook. Just putting it simply, I didn't have Facebook before I came here, but it's such a shared mode of communication that it's hard to get anything done, whether you're trying to talk to friends or you have a business or you have a question you want to ask about something. It's been a centralizing force. And this is well documented when they talk about when major newspapers are talking about some of the problems of Facebook and misinformation. Myanmar is one of the test examples they're often holding up, and there's a reason for that. This is a country where there was not really internet. There were certainly not cell phones just a decade ago. When people wanted to hear the news, they would go to tea shops. Even the newspapers or TV, you couldn't really get much solid information about what was happening. So the commonly known thing was you'd go to a tea shop and you just hear all the rumors, and then through those rumors, you would start to make sense of it. So it went from that kind of culture to a culture where every single person within a couple years had smartphones, Web 2.0, and Facebook, mainly Facebook. That was the way they were sharing information and communicating. And so it was really this centralizing force that has brought people together. It's kind of been a perfect storm as well. And so I find it really interesting that on one hand, Bhante is discussing the use of Facebook as a way to reach lay people. It wasn't intended that way. It was intended as a simple Burmese language learning opportunity. But then it developed from all these people that he was practicing his Burmese with, and they realized he was a foreign monk. He started to use it to help them with their meditation practice or to guide them in life or to answer general questions. And he would do newsletters, and he would take questions from people and discuss matters openly, and all in written Burmese, sometimes in spoken Burmese and videos. And so it's this really kind of clever tool of using dynamic modern forms of social media to spread the Dhamma further and further. But then, of course, what happens unwittingly is he becomes at the center of this controversy by not really knowing how he got into it, just through this way of trying to answer these questions from lay people. And one of those questions happened to be with monks touching money. But what was really interesting about that was when he was describing the comments that occurred on this post where he was discussing this matter of monks touching money, the comments themselves showed completely alternative and conflicting forms of reality, where he would describe, one person would write, "Yes, I know of monks and monasteries that don't touch money. This is the name, this is the place, this is the person." Then the next person would write, "No, that's impossible. There's no one like that in this country." And he was getting, in the way he described it, sounded like it was like this 50-50 version of different sides asserting their own reality, and then clear as day, everyone seeing that these are two different versions of reality that are not matching up, and yet there they are side by side. And so I found that role that Facebook played in his Dhamma life here, and the good and the bad, really kind of, troubling and fascinating and inspiring, and all these things all together when seeing how it all played out.
Right. It's actually something that I see happening all over the internet now. It seems like you can, whether intentionally or unintentionally, like this information can be dropped in, and then and quickly polarize. And so, it's really fragile, and you can actually get an erroneous narrative setting in. It can become a standardized narrative. And so, I think there's a real vulnerability there. And so, it exemplifies itself in a place like Myanmar, especially since, as you said, Facebook isn't only just a part of life. It's actually, if you think about how they perceive the internet as Facebook, like they don't really use email, for example. Like when they're on the internet and they're communicating with people, it's Facebook. So, just that fragility in there.
Yeah, that's right. And sometimes when you're trying to give someone a website and you say, well, pull up your browser, I'll give it to you. They pull up the Facebook app and you say, no, I mean the website. And then you realize that either they don't have like Chrome or Mozilla on their phone, or if they do, they've never used it before. So this is just the standard way of how all communication gets done. That's replaced everything that came before it. So this was just not only a perfect storm of what Facebook has been in Myanmar, but also a perfect storm of this young foreign monk walking into this dynamic social media platform, which he doesn't even fully understand. And then these alternate versions of reality just competing with each other openly as it's unfolding.
Right. Another factor there is that he is a foreigner, and there's a particular. This is one of the pieces in the recipe for this perfect storm, is that Myanmar, I found, has a sensitivity to the influence of outsiders. We see that in their current attitude toward international media, and certainly I faced it as a monk, and U Sarana did as well. That coming in and making bold statements about the culture in general are that's in that fragility on that platform. And in this new era, it can so quickly, the sensitivity there is just so strong. I'm not surprised how quickly it polarized and became an issue, all the way up to him being sued.
So also, since we're on the topic of talking about media narratives and such, one of the things I found really interesting was this idea that U Sarana got behind the narrative. The narrative got in front of him. As he later told this whole story in all the details that he shared with us, these facts were very different than the broad narrative strokes that I was hearing as this happened. And it has to be said, this was a really big deal in Myanmar. I don't know if it was reported in actual newspapers, but that kind of doesn't matter because Facebook is its own kind of newspaper. This was something that throughout the country, I think you could just go to someone and say, have you heard about this issue of the Czech monk, or they might not know he's Czech, the foreign monk who's talking about monks touching money? And I think a lot of people, just that quick test, a lot of people would have heard some version of that story, even though no one really had the complete version. And there were a couple different takes that I heard with these broad narratives, one that was more favorable towards U Sarana and one that was less favorable. The more favorable one presented a story of this foreign monk who was trying to live under this really good discipline and follow these rules. And because he was being more open about the need to follow these rules, that this establishment or some senior monks were kind of coming down on him and not wanting him to reveal this level of rule following that he was carrying out because it put others in a bad light. The narrative that got ahead of him that wasn't as favorable took kind of the same story, but it just put it in a negative light, that here you have this foreign monk who is also very junior, and he's coming into our country and he's telling other people how they should be acting and casting this judgment. So in both cases, there's this overarching narrative view, which ends with him being admonished. And actually, in the end, very few of those things were actually accurate. And this is something that you hear in media studies anywhere, certainly in America as well, that once you get behind the narrative, even if the actual facts on the ground contradict every aspect of that narrative, it's hard to ever get your message out there again, because that initial narrative takes hold, not just at the time it's happening, but for big events, even for years and decades later, people still remember that narrative more than they remember how the actual facts played out. And so when you hear U Sarana speak about this story in detail and what happened every step of the way, he was taken to monastic court. That's true, but he didn't face any kind of censure or admonishment in his telling. He got off scot-free, and not only that, he had somewhat of a blessing to carry this mission on further. He had some advice and some guidance and the level of care he had to choose in how he presented the Buddha's words, but and bringing scriptural reference. But neither of those early narratives were necessarily true, and in accordance with the facts as he later told them. So, through no fault of his own, just by falling behind that overarching narrative structure, that kind of got set in people's minds and was very different from the actual story that came forward.
Right. It's kind of like a wildfire, huh? Once the wind starts blowing, it just takes off like crazy. And it's really like this, like you've been saying, it's the perfect storm. There's lots of things come together in that moment that we've talked about some of them. When I was a monk, there is this difficulty, because we do approach foreign monks approach the Dhamma differently. We come from the text because we don't have a culture or tradition of it, whereas they come from it's such a part of their culture that they lean on tradition. And so sometimes these things come into conflict. I mean, there's some things that are beautifully carried forward in their tradition, and these are some things that we miss in Western Buddhism sometimes. But there are other things that they carry forward that aren't actually part of the text, and so but they just become normalized, and then so touching money is one of those issues. And then you have so there's a lot of foreign monks that are trying they're trying to follow the Dhamma and the Vinaya, especially in this case the Vinaya, as best as they can, according to what they understand directly from the text, or at least the translation of the Pali text, right? And it's not like there can't be any errors in there, but they're sourcing it more directly. But this can put foreigners in conflict with the tradition. This happens quite a bit. Now, I think one skillful way to handle it is just to be a good monk, but kind of mind your own business in a way. If you choose not to do that and you choose to voice the issues, there's probably thousands of ways to be unskillful with this, and this happens a lot. And then there's a way to do it. And what I've always found interesting about Bhante is he tried to be skillful about the second choice. He learned Burmese to the best of his ability and to quite a pretty high level where he could articulate himself. And he also tried to mimic their academic monastic learning in such a way that he would be able to make it not his opinion or a foreigner's opinion, but directly pointing to the sources of either the Buddhist words or the commentaries or the sub-commentaries words. And in this culture, they highly value the text and the commentaries and the sub-commentaries. And so in this case, when he did go to court, he had actually written a small book about this topic, those 5 points he made, and came prepared with these scriptural references to, and so that's actually what saved him. I've just not met another monk that has prepared himself with these difficulties that foreigners face in that particular way, and it paid off for him here. Thank goodness.
Yeah, that was an enormous story of going to court with a book that was already written on this very issue that was able to be referenced, and to make use of a court-appointed interpreter who just happened to be one of the masters of Vinaya. He definitely set himself good in that situation. Yeah, and I want to go back to something you had said just a moment ago about foreigners that are taking these kind of points more seriously and trying to live by them. You're talking about foreign monks that are coming to practice in Burmese Buddhist monasteries, but if you take that on a more general perspective, that's something that's kind of true anywhere. Is that when you're looking at new, I don't know what to call them, new converts or new students, new learners, new disciples to a certain kind of field, they bring with them a different sense than the people that come from that. And that's true whether you're talking about art or music or religion or whatever it is, that when you're coming from outside of that tradition and you're choosing to want to be involved in it, it's ironic that in some ways you do take a more traditionalist approach because you're making such a profound decision in your own life to come to a different place and a foreign practice, whatever that practice is. And because you have made that decision, you really want to do it the right way. And that's very different from coming up in it where that's the only thing you know. And I think the first time I was exposed to this idea, I was actually hearing about the foreigners that would come to India to learn sitar. And I think the Indian teachers were saying something about how these foreigners just had much more respect and interest in learning some of the foundation of the chords they had to use to play the sitar, whereas the local Indians sometimes would want to jump to something else. And there was just a more focus and interest and desire to want to abide by and learn that tradition because these musical students had come to want to learn that in the first place. And so that when you apply that kind of logic to the foreigners that are coming here to ordain and be monks, like for the level of sacrifice they're making in their lives, it would be kind of silly if they did all of that and then they were only following the rules halfway.
Right. So I think that's like the plus point of coming in from, as a, someone so novel to a tradition. The flip side of that, the ugly side of that is sometimes that is a condition for arrogance, right? A way to judge the locals. Hey, they're not, they're traditionalists, and they, the discipline has slipped, and now it's like this, and that's normalized, and they're. I mean, my mind certainly as a monk had, suffered that at times. And I mean suffered that because it's my suffering, right? It caused conflict internally. And then if I spoke it, even if I tried to speak it carefully, it still led to conflict. What I was forgetting often is causes and conditions. And, we were reminded of this in Alan's interview, like he said, like, could I have been a horrible person? The ones that were doing these atrocious things. Yeah, and in the right conditions, I could. I mean, I don't think touching money is as atrocious as the things he was talking about. But certainly, of course, if I grew up in Myanmar and I became a monk in a certain monastery and the people around me that's what they did, then of course that's what I would do. So there can be a lack of compassion on the other side. And a lack of appreciation. It can become too extreme in the sense that then Westerners sometimes then just toss all the tradition out as not being of value, and I think that goes too far as well. So there's this balance on both sides. I think there's something to appreciate in tradition, and I think there's something to appreciate in what Westerners bring to to Buddhism in general. And I don't think we've quite yet reached that balance, but mindfulness and awareness will help us get there.
Yeah, that's true. Both certainly have a lot to be able to offer, both sides of coming together and wanting to look at how to practice and make the most out of these precious teachings. What you talked about also makes me think of the line, so to speak, that we as Westerners come out of in coming to Asia, which is the Orientalist movement. And the Orientalists fell exactly into the trap that you described of looking at their understanding of the text and judging very harshly that the contemporary people of that country were not living up to the mark. And I think that kind of arrogance that we saw 150 years ago among the Orientalists, these Westerners who were studying Asian life and religion and practices, I think that's something that's still very much found today by foreigners who come to Myanmar and other countries, is this arrogance that you have lost the right way, which we have gained, we have preserved, and there's still that kind of judging and harsh critique. And that when you talk about the perfect storm of where U Sarana found himself, that that deep pain and hurt on the Burmese side of foreigners coming and yet again giving a lecture of what they're supposed to be doing, especially about their own practice, can really strike a nerve. And actually, U Sarana never did that. He would never even think about doing that. But that's how the initial narrative started to take shape.
Right, and that narrative actually it formed on the back of these kinds of things happening historically. So there's actually a precedent for it. So that's also part of the perfect storm, like what the conditions that are developing culturally ahead of that. So it was just such a ripe environment for the whole quagmire to arise.
So staying with this topic of U Sarana describing the situation of monks touching money, one of the last things he said I also found quite striking, and that's where I think I had asked him the question of, in this deeply devout Buddhist country, why is one of this most fundamental of rules not being followed? Why is it so hard? And he answered by discussing the 5 immeasurables, and specifically describing how on the lay side, the faith in these people you're supposed to have faith in and show respect for, he didn't say it this way, but reading between the lines, there was this inference that the faith in these people and the deference to these people was replacing the critical thought in examining what they were actually saying, how they were actually living, what was being done in accordance with scriptural accuracy and adhering to the text and the scriptures. And so that by following the 5 immeasurables and showing respect for who they should show respect for, there was a certain kind of critical faculty that was being shut off. And I found that very interesting. Another theme that links back to other guests we've had, we talked about this extensively with the interview with the Baba Sayadaw, where we talked about him being someone that stepped outside of this normal way of just doing what you're told and staying within a certain form. And his own openness and critical faculties had led him far away from the usual way that you're expected to behave in a traditional Burmese Buddhist society. And it also links forward, just to give a little bit of a preview, to Sway Win, a guy we'll be having on, a political prisoner who started meditating while in jail, and is also central to his story of really being against this mindset that you just have to do things the way you're told because everyone else has done them. And it's interesting here because these 5 immeasurables, I mean, on face value, this is a wonderful thing. You should pay respect for people that are deserving of respect. I mean, who could argue with that? And who could argue the quality of deferring to people that have some kind of stature or have offered you something precious in your life? And yet the way that U Sarana contextualizes the 5 measurables taking place in Burmese Buddhist society, it's being seen as as blocking these critical faculties to be able to look at this fundamental following of the Vinaya.
And of course, that's like an analysis. They don't actually know that anything's being blocked, right? They're just following along with things that they believe are valuable in the way that they do them, this reverence, right? And and I'm not sure where that comes from. If it's commentarial, they don't necessarily know or care where it comes from. I mean, if it's scripturally relevant, whether it comes from, for them, that means either from the early scriptures or from the commentaries or sub-commentaries. That's good enough, whereas, I look at it as like, well, I mean, the suttas are full of local people complaining about the behavior of the monks, and this actually helped shape the Vinaya because the monks were behaving poorly, and the admonishment that not behaving well as a monk actually harms the faith of the people. And so it's an interesting, how to say, kind of like a straitjacket for traditional people, because they do suffer bad behavior of monks. And yet culturally, and not just as a letter of law culturally, but in their hearts as well, there's this conflict, there's this tension, because they do have such reverence for the monastic order in general. So, I mean, internally they have this quagmire themselves that they what do you do with that? Of course, they defer to the respect. In Asian culture, as far as I've learned, they're going to defer to not confronting anyways, and then the respect level is I mean, that's not just a show. It's so deep in their hearts as well. So I actually appreciate the struggle of that whole situation and kind of understand how it manifests like this. But it's easy to not see the nuances of that as a Westerner and then just come in and judge. And I think that's problematic. That just adds more suffering, essentially.
Yeah, it really takes a skillful balance to be able to come to such a foreign country and culture and practice. And on one hand, to not lecture, to not say, well, I've read these books or I've done this practice or I have this teacher and therefore this is the way it has to be. And then the other hand, not be, so to speak, like an apologist for everything and a justifier, a defender that, oh, this is everything that's being done here. This is exactly how it should be and nothing's wrong. And there's every aspect of this society is completely in accordance. And I think that when, as a practitioner, you're here for longer periods, I think I definitely have strayed to either side at times, and then realized I was a little far over and had to self-correct. But to try to balance that and to see things as they are, to have proper respect, but also critical faculties, to have faith, but also trust in yourself and your own understanding of the practice and the teachings, that is something that takes incredible skill.
Right. Well, I think it's how to say it. I think in the history of Buddhism, there's a rare opportunity here where there is an East meets West phenomenon. And it's not just East and West so much as a tradition and culture, and on the one hand, and scripture on the, well, I guess that's oversimplifying it, but I think the two different approaches, really, there's an opportunity there that I think both, overall, there could be a benefit. Of course, I come from one side of it, so all I can actually do is do the work of balancing internally and looking at looking at what the mind does with things, like you said, going to sometimes to one side too strongly, and then but blaming that on well, they're like this and that's what the problem is, not looking at like the source of suffering that's really in this mind. And so the work I can do is internal, and the work I tend to do when the mind goes unchecked is to try to correct everything externally, and that there is a way to influence that skillfully, and perhaps Bhante has showed us some of that by looking at how they approach things and try to acquiesce to some of the ways and means.
So yeah, this conversation about the monks touching money and U Sarana's role in all of this last year, it's such a rich topic. There's so many different angles and elements to look at and to process. And another part that we focused on that I spent quite a few questions following up on because I found his approach so fascinating was this idea that he wanted, his solution for wanting to correct this problem going on was to look for lay involvement and greater lay control of Sangha issues than monks themselves. And that was quite surprising to me because in the reading that I've done, and I referenced this in the interview with him, there's these historical precedents of the king and other lay officials that are getting into Sangha matters, and there's often quite a bit of pushback from the monks themselves saying, hey, you do your thing over there, this is your job, and you let us be independent and do what we're supposed to do and not interfere to too great a degree. And he's basically waving a flag saying, over here, interfere, come here and tell us what to do. And I was quite confused what his motivation was for that. And when I pressed further, he finally revealed at the end the motivation was that the seniors in the Sangha who could be doing something about this are not making it a priority, and him as a junior doesn't have many options open. And so for him, in his place, the best way forward that he saw was to have lay people of stature start to speak out more and do what they could to try to influence changes.
Right. And I wonder about that. That's something I actually have a leaning towards, that I don't think, unless it involves laws of the country, that anyone outside the monastic order should be involved in these kind of things. Yet, when I heard in his explanation that quite good reasons for it in this particular case. So, but when I've heard about like kings disrobing monks and stuff, I always thought that was wrong, because there's really only 5 ways to be disrobed: committing one of the 4 defeats or parajikas, or deciding yourself to disrobe. That's the 5th way. There is actually, according to the Buddhist teaching, there is no other way. I mean, unless you count dying as a disrobing. But and so yeah, I think this is really like, do we really expect the lay supporters to memorize the monks' rules, and is it that their responsibility? Is it the government's responsibility in general? So, I mean, I guess it just takes flexibility, because like Bhante explained, he made a good case for it. So I just worry about the precedent that sets, and so I'll acquiesce to the point he made, and yet I still think it's a discussion. It's inconclusive in my mind. I think ideally it would not be outside of the monastics, but then I'm not sure everything going on these days is ideal. So there are different conditions, and they may call for different decisions.
That's right. It's a dangerous precedent to go down that road, but it's also might be a situation where there's no easy solutions. Every answer is going to be fraught with some kind of risk, and this is just the particular risk that U Sarana is feeling is the most appropriate one given these circumstances.
Right. Well, at a personal level, when I was a monk, I didn't touch money, and it wasn't just rule following. There's a real beauty, the Buddha talks about a dust-free life, compared to the lay life. And if one holds on to money in those circumstances, it really, they'll never know that freedom. And so I have a personal wish that people will take that chance and actually abide by that rule. So there is an attachment there. And so this particular controversy over money and what does it mean to be a monk? A monk is one who doesn't touch money. That's, I think, how Bhante described the words of the Buddha on this issue. I would like to see creative ways to get back to that, and so it's interesting that it's come up at all. So even if it was a controversy at the way it came up and the results of it, I wonder about the narrative and how that will carry through, versus like just the overall issue. Now that it's on everyone's radar, I just wonder what will happen with it, and I'm curious about the future in that sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is something that U Sarana feels strongly about, but was never so much a social mission until now. And it happened organically, as we heard about in the interview. And now that there's some momentum behind it, and he's collaborating with local, very highly respected sayadaws that have been following this in their own way in their own region, it's quite interesting the resources he can now bring together. And talked about that at the end, talked about the shape that collaboration was taking place in terms of providing education and materials, working in concert with those monks and communities that are already making this a priority themselves.
Right. It'll if it manifests, it'll be interesting to see how it does. Something I observed in Myanmar is like the way the way things move is often gears that turn behind the scenes. And so I've seen some really clever and very skillful ways because there's a conflict, right? There are not just a majority of monks touching money, but even some very, very senior monks in positions of power. So how you go about shifting that without embarrassing people and having people lose face, there's a way to do that. So I'm not sure we'll see the machinations of it, but it'll be interesting to see if it unfolds more or not.
Yeah, and especially now that there's this greater openness. I mean, there was an openness on the Burmese side of this Facebook thing kind of exploding and everyone getting a window into what was happening and how people were responding and what was taking place. Even if it wasn't quite an accurate telling, it was still through the mechanism of Facebook. It was something everyone could participate in. And hopefully through a podcast like this, which is in English, both his discussion of the matter and our processing it here, that is also carrying the conversation and the messaging to more people to be able to learn the level of detail and context and history about this matter and to have a sense of interest and appreciation moving forward to see how it develops, as well as for foreigners in this country having a renewed sense and sensibility of where they want to fall on how they're making their own donations and how they're viewing monks they're in contact with concerning their own following of this Vinaya.
Right. Well, it's a fascinating topic. We'll see what happens.
Yeah. Great. Then good. It was great being able to discuss someone that we both know so well and have such a history with.
Absolutely.
Okay, then I think we're good for now. This has been a great talk, and connect on the next speaker.
Great. I'll see you next time.
Okay, great. Take care. You have been listening to the Insight Myanmar podcast. We invite you to rate, review, and share our podcast, as every little bit of feedback helps. You can also subscribe to the Insight Myanmar podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever else you get your podcasts. Also, make sure to check out our website for our complete episodes, including additional text, videos, and other information at www.insightmyanmar.org. That's one word, INSIGHTMYANMAR.org. If you cannot find our feed on your podcast player, please let us know, and we will ensure that it can be offered there in the future. We would also like to take this time to thank everyone who made this podcast possible, especially our two sound engineers, Martin Combs and Tharng A, along with Zach Hessler, content collaborator and part-time co-host. Ken Pransky helps with editing, Kishingbat Gamble does our social media templates, and Dragos Bandita and Andre Francois make our sketches. We'd also like to thank everyone who has assisted us bringing the guests who have made up the show thus far, as well as the guests themselves for agreeing to come and share. Finally, we are immensely grateful for the donors who made this entire thing possible.